Last episode, we had duty. Duty is sacrifice, Lord Cregan told us. And this week, that second part, the sacrifice, really hits hard. It's a sacrifice to the god of politics, a ruthless, capricious, and thankless deity, or perhaps we should say the god of power. But this episode and that concept also explores what duty means. Not all facets of it, mostly these extreme versions, the kind stretched to the point that it may no longer resemble duty, but it certainly retains the concept of sacrifice. Aegon believed it's his duty to kill the murderer of his child, even if it meant killing innocents. Arguably, that's revenge, not duty, but again, it's all where you're sitting. Otto clearly disagreed with that logic and thinks keeping the peace is their primary duty, even though he's got a lot of blood on his hands for what's happened to date. Alicent and Helena's duty in this episode is to make their very real grief, normally a private thing, as public as possible. Criston Cole certainly has a take on duty here, much to the dismay of Sir Arik and his twin Sir Eric. Daemon and Rhaenyra have a bitter argument rooted around trust and duty, but there's also the small folk. What is Hugh Hammer's duty to his wife and daughter? What are Alan and Adam's duties to each other and to Lord Corlys? What of the duty of the wives and families of the murdered ratcatchers? What of Mysaria, who has no family or household to be loyal to? And just as duty means different things to different people, so does sacrifice. This is yet another massive consequence of war. The overturning of society to a point where what's right and wrong is no longer clear, or to use the example of the episode title, even cruelty and kindness can be hard to separate. The episode title, by the way, is Rhaenyra the Cruel. What were simple choices become morally fraught. On the strength of some amazing acting performances and the excellent delivery of a scene immortalized in legend since the earliest chapters of A Game of Thrones back in 1996, many are calling this one of the best episodes of House of the Dragon yet. We'll talk about all that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome. Make sure to catch our breakdowns of every episode. We summarize all the action as succinctly and neatly as possible to get you ready for the full review, which you're hearing right now. We have our live streams at 6 on Monday, and on Wednesdays we do a deep dive of the week. And last week it was Blood and Cheese. This week it's Eric and Arik, so we'll talk about them Wednesday at 7, and won't be talking about them much at all during this episode since we've got so much else to discuss. Saturdays at 3 we have our preview episodes, where we talk about everything we expect to be coming, including spoilers, things from the books, but never leaks. And of course, game streams at 6 Eastern on Friday on twitch.tv/History of Westeros. All right, so if you have questions for us, you can put them here live in the chat if you're watching live, or send them to westeroshistory@gmail.com, or join our Facebook or Discord groups and join the discussion there. You should see links in the description. I'd love to hear what you liked most or didn't like, your favorite performances, Easter eggs, and callback. We'll start with that ourselves with just a little more setup first. As I said, the episode's called Rhaenyra the Cruel. It was directed by Claire Kilner. It's her 4th episode directing House of the Dragon, and she's got one more to come this season, episode 5, which we don't have a title on yet. She directed season 1, episode 4 and 5, so the last 2 episodes right before the time jump, King of the Narrow Sea and We Light the Way, with the big wedding and everything. And then The Green Council, which was episode 9 of the split finale. So she got to focus on all Eric and Arik and the chase for Aegon and all the politicking at the last minute there after the death of Viserys. Of course, the episode was written by Ryan Condal and Sarah Hess and was a nice 69 minutes long. Sean, what did you think of the episode overall?
I loved it. I loved the last episode too, to be clear. I think I might have liked this one more, but I think it would be splitting hairs to try to put one over the other. I think this one, at least it stood out to me more a few sort of cinematic moments. I feel like there was more moments where the camera kind of lingered on an image or a face without any dialogue or action. And I love that kind of thing. It gives you as an audience member to kind of ponder what's happened and what's going to happen, think about what the character's going through. It's a part of filmmaking, cinematography and imagery and stuff. I like it when that gets featured more so than, obviously I like dialogue too, but a picture says 1,000 words, If I could say one quick thing, if we're not going to focus as much as Eric and Arik on this, I just had a quick thought that we could probably elaborate on Wednesday. That
Sure.
Early on, like last season, I was kind of frustrated. Like, why would they have twins with similar names? There's so many parts about this. It seems so unusual. It's so troubling from there's already a bunch of Aegons, a lot of similar names and characters and everything to keep up with, and it just make it more difficult. But the Eric Garrick thing is still a little unjustifiable to me. However, the twins themselves are much more justifiable, one, for this plot point of one being able to come in as disguised as the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But furthermore, and maybe even making the names more justifiable too, I think they are sort of a microcosm of the whole thing that's going on here. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
From a distance, they look the same. They're both have torn loyalties. They're parts of sides that have good and bad parts. They're fighting to the death over it. They're, all these things I'm saying about them, you could say about the Greens and the Blacks. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Allegory for the whole dilemma.
We've made similar points before. I'm glad you caught that on your own, because I don't think you've ever heard me say that. But absolutely, I agree with you, and it's a very fitting metaphor. It really does encapsulate a lot about the Dance of the Dragons by itself. Great take. What about you, Shay? What did you think of the episode overall?
Well, I love this one, but it was also extra long, so there was just more to love. So I'm going to be biased probably throughout the season towards the longest of the episodes. But also, this was a pretty Helena-centric episode, and I'm fairly partial to Helena, and I thought they really gave her a chance to shine here. So I loved it, and I'd been waiting for Eric and Arik for... God, a long time, a very, very long time to see this very tragic brother versus brother fight. And I'm not one for fights exactly, but it had me on the edge of my seat. It was really dramatic. I loved it.
Right there with y'all. I thought it was an amazing episode. In terms of acting, it might be the strongest episode of the entire series so far, which is only, to be fair, only 12 episodes. But still, the acting has been really good throughout, so this is really saying something. I had a hard time picking. We did our usual Facebook group poll, and last I checked, Rhaenyra and Otto and Aegon were doing the best, which is Tom Glencarney as Aegon, Emma D'Arcy as Rhaenyra, and of course Rhys Ifans as Otto. And hard to disagree with that. You might not have picked them specifically, but you can see why someone else might. Daemon and Rhaenyra's conflict was really strong. I thought it was a very realistic argument, the way they moved around and kind of stalked back and forth, and the barely contained rage and frustration and just trying to say things really quickly. Yeah, very realistic. So let's start with the Red Keep, where the episode begins. The action actually stays here for a full 15 minutes. That's very unusual for any show, but this show or Game of Thrones in general, because it's usually pretty quick to shift the action to kind of keep you back-footed with just so much happening. It's kind of a quality of this show, but even more so, Game of Thrones did that because, well, there are a lot more locations to go to. That's one reason.
That was one other thing I was thinking a lot about this episode, is that I don't know how parallels are a little easier to draw, maybe because there's sort of basically just two sides, right? In Game of Thrones, you're jumping back and forth between, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 different storylines and characters. But in this one, it's pretty much just 2. And so it's a little easier sometimes to compare and contrast things.
Yeah. And it's also easier to see how they connect. Like early on in a Game of Thrones, you're like, well, how is Arya in Essos connecting to anything? You know it's going to, but it's not necessarily easy to connect that. Like right now, you can see, well, I don't exactly know what's going on with Alan and Adam, but they're connected to Lord Corlys, and he's connected to the Black. So it's like, that's at least somewhat straightforward. Obviously, things can change, but it's not terribly confusing in that regard. So with the beginning of the episode, they use this other technique that we saw mostly throughout season 6, episode 10 of Game of Thrones, meaning The Winds of Winter, the one with that haunting piano music all the way through it. It was a really different way of presenting the music, where it was really in the front. They do the same thing here during the commotion, and then it quickly changes back to sort of a normal music's in the background, dialogue in the front. But it's done very precisely. The music hits right when Aegon strikes the castle. The music stops being forefront and drops to the back. As well, they repeat this technique during the procession, where there's a drummer out front, and the drummer is in tune with the banging that we're seeing and with the panic in Helena's eyes as she's having a bit of a panic attack there. So it's really well done. The music was really well infused in this episode. And of course, it's always just excellently made because it's Ramin Djawadi, but, you know, they do such a good job of placing it. So during this chaotic, dreamlike sequence that's, of course, happening probably just an hour or two after the murder at most, there's people being rounded up, a dog is being given a cloth, the gates are closed, Aemond returns to find the secret door open and the coins missing. Great shot of the mural behind him in blue, reminding us of his sapphire eye, which is kind of neat. You can't see the sapphire eye, but you get the blue reflection. That's pretty cool. Great shot of him finding one of the coins, covering his eye as well. I particularly love this one. It's very striking, and it kind of reminds you of the Greek myths of putting the coins over your eyes when you're dead, or he's looking at the sigil of their own house here. The golden dragon is the sigil.
Game of Thrones too.
Yeah, true. They weren't coins. They were like painted stones, but it's a similar thing. It's very similar. I certainly thought of that when the thing with Jon Arryn, which I think you're referring to, is the first thing I thought of too.
Yeah.
They did it with Tywin also, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. They did it with Tywin. Yeah, the little painted stones, the eye stones. Yeah, that's pretty neat. They certainly got that idea from the Greek coin thing, and here we go with a more direct reference. So Aegon smashing the model is in a sense like the second doom of Valyria. He's destroying Valyria all over again. Don't worry, folks. This was a model of the model. They didn't destroy the original model. That one got set aside, taken off set, and I don't know who owns it now, but it wasn't just dumped in the trash can.
I hope it'll be part of a tour or something, and we'll get to see it. And, you know, they have the props tours and stuff.
I think that awesome. They said that it was all scanned. It was all... They can use a 3D printer to make it again. So if there's not yet, there probably will be multiple copies of it. So.
Yeah, that's how they made the one to get smashed. Yeah, exactly. So Red Ned does what a good friend should do. He closes the door while his friend is deep in enraged grief. Also, a correction for myself. I called this actor African-American. I don't know why I did that. This guy's British. So, whoops. My bad. Anyway, Aegon is shouting things. He shouts, "I declare war." He shouts, "Traitors and villains." And he shouts, "Fire from the sky," which I don't quite know what he means by that. Is that just shouting like how he intends to get his revenge, get on his dragon? That's kind of what I thought, but it was a little unusual, and I thought it was worth mentioning.
My guess is in the filming, he probably said 30 things and they picked out 5 or 10 snippets to stick in there.
That's possible. Although they did say it was only one take because they didn't have multiple models for him to smash. So good job, Tom Glencarney, doing it so well on that, limited filming opportunity. But the phrase he says that most sticks out to me is, "I am the king." And that's a callback to Tywin Lannister telling Joffrey, "Any man who must say, 'I am the king,' is no true king at all." And indeed, Aegon's reign is not as secure as he had been told, and we have a similar parallel follow-up when Otto confronts Aegon about a couple of different things, and the way he talks to him in the council scene, which we'll get to next. Aegon complains about being seen as weak, and Otto's like, "You're already seen as weak." And Otto, a hasty coronation, a dragon escaping the pit, the people see an omen. Yeah, he's not wrong. So Otto is it's tough, but he's not wrong. He's saying truth. He's not trying to water down the facts here, even if people don't like hearing it.
A couple of points I want to make in the subtitles in the very opening. When you were pointing out how the music kind of starts out in the front, the subtitles say "muffled chaos."
Yeah.
Just the sound of the commotion in the castle. And I have several thoughts here, but one I want to point out, they're using a heck out of these sets that they built, and I'm so glad. I really appreciate the imagery we get of the courtyard and the castle and everything. But also that muffled chaos thing kind of reminds me of a theme, a motif maybe of this episode or the series. Because in the same way that they close the door when Aegon's having his little temper tantrum, Otto later closes the door when he's yelling at Aegon and Criston Cole. And in general, they're trying to keep this quiet, at least at first, much like Viserys dying. They want to keep control over the PR, right? Don't let everyone know. Muffled chaos. There's something crazy. The kid just got killed, but don't let this news get out. Aegon has this idea that he doesn't want anyone to know about it. It shows that we're weak. Otto wants to use it to his advantage. But I still think there's a little bit of a theme here of like control being lost and the reality of that trying to be kept behind closed doors. Does that
Sure.
make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. So Aegon kind of lays into everybody and says, first, where was the Lord Commander of my Kingsguard? Cole says a bed, which, technically true. It was just his mother's bed. So, yeah, I mean, he wasn't lying. More on that later, because we have a follow-up conversation about the security here. But Larys enters to tell them they've caught Blood, just naming him a gold cloak. Again, we don't know what this guy's name is, and saying he had the prince's head in a sack. So it's pretty literally caught red-handed there. That's basically straight from the book, though in the book, Alicent dishes out the torture instead of Aegon, and it's a lot worse. It's drawn out over almost 2 weeks.
Can I say another little snippet here? Larys comes in the midst of this argument and commotion in the council room, and he finally interjects when Aegon turns his negative energy towards Alicent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You caught that, but he's kind of letting it play out till Alicent gets a target on herself. He's like, "Oh, by the way, we got the bad guy," and then that kind of takes heat back off Alicent.
Yeah, he was letting the rage fly around until he found the right moment to step in. That's a good point. Yeah, he didn't say something. You're right that he walked in and didn't say something right away. He waited. That's a good catch. So Aegon is perplexed that they could be thinking of anyone but Rhaenyra. He thinks she's laughing at him. And this goes to show he's not thinking very clearly, and maybe isn't a clear-headed guy in the first place, but he's in full rage mode. Otto knows better. Otto knows that Rhaenyra isn't a baby killer. This isn't something she would do. Daemon, on the other hand, sure, he would do this, but Otto says it doesn't matter. He's like, yeah, on one hand it does, in case they're still coming after us. We have to worry about current security still. On the other hand, we're going to blame this on Rhaenyra no matter what. It's too juicy a political opportunity to let go. I've used this example a few times. It calls back a key moment in the show The Wire, where Slim Charles confronts his boss and says, hey, they killed one of our guys, let's go get them. And he's like, it wasn't them. And he's like, what? Well, don't tell our guys that. Our gang is all fired up to go attack our rivals. Don't let them know that it was someone else, because they're ready to go. They're ready to die for you right now. They're ready to go risk their lives. And this is a rare opportunity. Let's use it. Same thing here. It doesn't have to be true. It's so politically valuable. He says, I will not let Jaehaerys die in vain. And then, of course, later, it's part of why Otto gets so mad later that this plan gets, which is such a difficult thing to do, just gets thrown in the trash after the fact. They go through all the effort to do it, and then Aegon undermines it.
I think Ryan Condal in the inside the episode bit, he said something along, he was quoting someone else. I don't even know who quite to attribute the quote to, but never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
And and it's also worth noting it's extra frustrating because this is a difficult pitch for Otto to make on a few levels. Because one, I believe at least, that he's not a robot. He is emotionally disturbed by this himself. Maybe some fear for his life, remorse for his daughter and the boy himself that was killed. But he has this sort of big picture sense, this responsibility, this leadership, and he's like, this is sad, it's awful, but also we have to make it through this too. We have to keep making decisions and go through our day, and the war is on, etc. So what do we do now? And Aegon and Alicent and many of the other people involved, they are not at that point yet, whether in their general maturity or their grief at the moment. And so this is a tough sell for him to make, and Alicent is able to kind of side with him and rein Aegon in. But Alicent and Helena themselves have to suffer extra. They have to be put on parade for this grief, which makes it extra frustrating for Aegon to kind of ruin the whole thing. So.
Yes, yeah, very much. Otto wears Aegon down. You're right that at first, even Alicent is kind of against it. She says, father, when he makes the suggestion, but he just doesn't stop. He's relentless. He's like, look, the political value is too much. This could save our lives doing this now. This could be the difference between us all dying or not. So we definitely can't throw it away. This is what he means when he says Jaehaerys shouldn't die in vain. And Alicent's like, yeah, I guess, he sets us on a difficult course, but the hand is right. He kind of says it gently. And it's, Tom Glencarney's acting is so great. He goes from the rage to breaking down over it, being kind of realizing they're right. He doesn't say it, but he stops arguing. He's just like, yeah, all right, fine. It's a heartbreaking display of how politics dehumanizes people. The strategic value of this procession is horrible, but the Aegon the father can't bear this, but Aegon the king, it's good advice, right? And that's why and that's what you're referring to, Sean. Otto's already in hand of the king mode. The rest of them are still in family mode. They're still, well, maybe not, Orwyle and Jasper Ironrod, the guys who aren't part of the family, but they recognize that grief is present in the room with these people who are having to be two things at once when those two things are at odds. Being a king and being a father are often at odds. Here in particular. And the same thing with Alicent, being a mother and being the queen dowager. She's like, I don't want to make my daughter go do that, but I'm gonna. It's the same thing, comes back to duty. That's exactly what Alicent says. Helena's like, I don't want to do it. And she has to really explain it because she asks all the questions like, why? Why? I don't want to. And then just straight up, why? Why do we have to do it? Why do we have to pretend? Why do we do it? It's like the most cutting questions. And Alicent answers, doesn't hesitate. She's like, we have a duty to the realm. We have to do this, we do that. Like she has her answers ready. And it's really sad, really dehumanizing, and just goes to show some of the same things you mentioned with Eric and Ark and how this all really encapsulates the horrors of civil war, of a family turning on itself, and when the realm is brought along for the ride.
I will say, though, this is another moment to draw a parallel, because compare this fallout, the Greens' response or whatever to the boy being killed, to the Blacks.
Yeah.
Rhaenyra gets her grief, if you will, her way, right? Luke is dead. She flies off. She's not in a council meeting. She's not making plans. She's trying to find evidence of her son's body. She's trying to accept the reality of it, whatever it is. It's a different response. Alicent and Helena and these other characters, they don't really get the chance to grieve that Rhaenyra did. Mm-hmm. But it was sort of at the sacrifice of strategy, right? In the meantime, Daemon's jumping out of his skin, trying to, look, we got to do something now. We got to act, and nothing's happening. And it's possible they could have made a key move. They could have sent a bunch of ravens out talking about how their boy was unjustly killed by these upstart Greens, but none of that happened.
They didn't capitalize on the crisis. The Greens are. Right. Yeah, Daemon is not Otto, even though there's a lot of parallels between them in this episode of what happens to them storyline wise and how they have a falling out a bit with their respective leadership. But yeah, that's one thing they didn't have in common. They're basically in an identical position. There's no official hand of the king, an official hand of the queen right now, but Daemon is kind of effectively in that role. Yeah. Maybe that'll change now that he's left as of this episode. But to this point, clearly that's his role. And he was more like an Aegon or an Aemon, just I want to get them. He wasn't thinking of the big picture. So, in fact, he very much hurt the big picture. He did the opposite of look at the big picture. He hurt them badly in terms of that, which we'll get to a little bit later. Back to Helena here. She hands the shroud for Jaehaerys to her mother, and we wonder if she knew that was coming or if this even was meant to be a burial shroud ahead of time, but she couldn't have just made it all of a sudden. This is a long-term project.
I think that is what she was stitching in that last episode. She was. When she was scared of the rats.
No, I know that. I'm saying did she know it was a burial shroud at the time? That's what I'm not clear about.
Stitching it, right. She might not have realized why she was stitching it. Yeah. Just that she had this vision of it, I guess.
Yeah. So it's unclear, but during the actual procession, as I briefly mentioned before, she has what appears to be a panic attack, and they clarify in the BTS that is what she's having. It's a panic attack, and it's really well done. The acting is extremely authentic, and she can really feel her panic, and it's got that drums going. The drums really add to that tension that was done to add to the scene. They knew the drums would make the tension be greater. You have Alicent kind of helping hold her knee, and she's just
I don't even think it's that necessarily. When she's holding her knee, that's Alicent's fear and anxiety. That we see Alicent is always clenching and has all that stuff. I think that shows she's I don't know. I don't necessarily think that Helena is comforted by that squeeze on her leg.
Oh, I agree. I don't think it did comfort her. I think that might be what she was trying to do, but it was really, I think you're right. It was projecting. I think Alicent was maybe doing it more for herself. Olivia Cook, by the way, very funny to lighten the mood of this scene. She talks in the BTS about how quickly Fia Saban, that's Helena, of course, would go from this incredible tragic acting, playing this role so well, So just in between scenes, just like bouncing happily because she's just like having a good time sitting on this carriage, just being driven around with her friend Olivia Cook, just hanging out. Because of course they're not that far apart in age. They don't have mother-daughter type gap in real life in age-wise there. So one thing we expected to talk about today that we will have to talk about some other time whenever it actually happens, because it didn't happen, is this riot. So there was no riot accompanying this funeral. They fooled us in the trailer there. There was scenes that made it look like there's a riot, which those scenes were real. They're really going to happen. They just aren't part of this. We thought it was one all big scene, but apparently there's more to come. So
it's two different
we'll come back to that
dresses.
Oh, yeah. That we could have figured it out then before, but apparently it just looked similar, and we didn't give further thought to it.
Yeah, I didn't think to consider the dresses, because I also was expecting those riot scenes from the trailers to pop up here, and they didn't. And one thing that made me do is kind of reevaluate what was happening here. Part of it just showing the grief and the struggle, but I thought for a minute about why did they bother having that wheel get stuck and have them have the crowd kind of close in and Helaena have her little panic attack. I can kind of imagine, especially an episode pushing over an hour, they could have trimmed a minute off that, I think, and still got the gist of it across. But I wonder if it was symbolic or foreshadowing of this isn't going to go smoothly. It's not going to go how you think. There's going to be a hang up,
Yeah, or next time maybe, because it didn't. Like, that's what I thought. When the wheel got stuck, that's what I was like, oh, maybe this is it. But yeah, of course not. But I think that was just to heighten Helena's uncomfortability, how she was feeling. It was just to really make you feel her panic attack.
It does that too, but I think it's showing that there's going to be a pothole in Otto's plan, that this isn't going to quite get the support that he's hoping for.
Okay, I like that. The metaphorical hole in the road there is, that's not so smooth after all. Okay, so there's a lot of things the crowd shout and that the procession leader shouts as well, and some of these are interesting. Behold the works of Rhaenyra Targaryen, defiler of the innocent. Now, in the subtitles, you see Kingslayer, but we are pretty darn sure it should be Kinslayer, because, well, for one thing, Jaehaerys is the king, but this does make Rhaenyra a Kinslayer, and you would think they would say that. So
it doesn't make Rhaenyra a Kinslayer, to be clear.
No, it does. It does, because they're blaming it on her.
Well,
that's the point. That's the point. Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. They're all just trying to make people believe these things about Rhaenyra. She's also not monstrous or cruel, which is what's said here. So Rhaenyra the monstrous, of course, is maybe a reference to Meleys the monstrous, and Rhaenyra the cruel, of course, is not only the reference to the title of the episode, but it's a reference to Maegor. They're trying to make her seem like Maegor, which does happen in the book. It's the phrase, I think, is Maegor with teats, rather than calling her Rhaenyra the cruel, but same difference. Just use the first part of the word instead of the second. Yeah, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Now, when Helaena returns from the procession, she's going up the stairs with her handmaids as Aegon is coming down with his guards. And they just kind of look at each other, and then Aegon just kind of passes her. Now, we interpreted this as they just didn't know what to say to each other. They're not a very close couple. They're brother and sister. They are king and queen, but they aren't that intimate, right? They've had relations in order to have kids and don't spend much time together other than that. But in the BTS, Tom Glencarney says they shared a moment here, that there was a lot unspoken. I don't know that came off, but I'm glad to hear it, and it does add a little more to the scene, although the scene had plenty going without that. What do you think, Sean?
I had that same confusion, that I felt like he was cold to her, distracted, unsympathetic, all kinds of things that are basically negative. But he said that she's the only other person that maybe really knows, or the closest to knowing how he really feels. Now, even that I think is unfair at best, because I'm trying to be sympathetic, but the fact is, he didn't give a crap about his son until 2 weeks ago, right? Like, he is not this good dad. A lot of this, I think, is for show. This is his ego and a power trip. It's not like he's been fawning over his kids this whole time and can't believe his son is dead now. He couldn't even tell his son and his daughter apart, So they're twins, I guess. But you see what I'm saying? I feel like that
That part
This
doesn't
is-
bother me. Even Jaime and Cersei say that
Yeah.
their mother and father couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah, maybe I'm pushing it with that point, but the idea is, I think that much like Daemon, this is his excuse for violence now. These and it's a shame. It's a point I wanted to make earlier, because I feel like we started to see some growth from him. We started to see him maybe shedding some of his irresponsibility, taking on the role of leader, learning from Otto and Lars. It seemed like there might be some hope for him as a person or a king. And now that is gone. I think now just anger and vengeance are just going to take over. And it kind of like Daemon using Rhaenyra's phrase, bring me Aemon, to be like, okay, now I can go do whatever violent thing I want. Aegon's son being dead is now an excuse for him to like push forward with the war, to assert his power, to put people, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said.
I was saying I don't disagree with any of what either of you thought about that scene, or I've seen other people think that. And I think it was my first impression, but on rewatching it and looking at kind of the nuances in Aegon's expression, I think it really does reflect the shared tragedy that they've shared, and the fact that he doesn't know how to address this with her. He feels that he's failed and he's seen as weak. He feels this deep shame and sadness. I think he really does feel that, and he can't bridge the gap between them. And so I see what Tom Glencarney was saying about this being a moment of connection to them, where like they see one another. I think Helena does see that he is tortured by this in that moment. You know, like I think she sees that, but that is no real help to her. And I also would like to point out that he has his multiple Kingsguard knights behind him as he walks around, right? Helena has 2 handmaidens. They still don't seem to value the queen's life enough to give her an actual guard. And I don't know.
Well, hey, they're like, they had their chance to kill her and they didn't, so we don't need to guard her. They clearly don't care. No.
I do see that other side, by the way, but what he and what you were saying, Ashaya, especially given, like I said, the parallels that they have, because we see how Rhaenyra treats Jace. Like, she embraces him, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he comes back and
Very
his brother's dead and they're struggling, and it's like a sentimental moment where they can share this sadness. But here, Aegon and Helena don't know how to do it. And later on, Alicent and Aegon don't know how to do it either. When she walks in and he's crying, she just goes back out. They just don't have a proper familial bond, or
they don't know how to show
it
affection.
takes.
Yeah, that's a family that doesn't know how to show affection. It's been a consistent pattern with them. It's very. This is something that the people identify with the Greens very early on that they dislike. They notice it right away. They don't like it. The Greens remind a lot of people of a real world conservative religious family that's got a lot of money, but not a lot of love for each other. They look to politics and image and power before they take care of each other. They don't know how to be affectionate. They don't know how to love each other. And not that the blacks are a whole lot better in that regard, but you do see them at least able to give each other basic comfort sometimes. Here, you're right. It's very, very stark how little they're able to comfort each other or even know how to. That's the thing I think you're right. You really touched on is they don't even know how to, because they didn't receive that kind of love growing up. They weren't comforted properly when they were children. Aegon, obviously, was not raised well. He was ignored by his family. Helena as well, maybe even more so. Probably even more so. It just, the consequences are maybe larger for the realm for not raising Aegon properly because he's the king. But still, the point stands for both of them.
I don't think Helena was ignored by Alicent, particularly anyway, because we've got a couple scenes with her kind of looking over her. But Aegon, I think, was... And I'm sure none of the other men in the family were paying any attention to Helena.
Well, I think Alicent checked out with Aegon. I think after Aegon raped Deanna, I think Alicent has struggled to face the monster that she birthed. I think she can't face the terrible thing that he did and will continue to do, and she knows she loves him still, but she can't show it. She can't hurt herself more over it. I don't know. It's really sad.
I agree with that, though. I'd say there was coldness even before that. You know, like even when he was younger, she just, again, I don't think like her mother died young, so this is probably a big part of why she has this lack of affection for her children, that she wasn't treated affectionately. It just goes on, back and forth, yeah.
Her father pushed her into a marriage with a man twice her age when she was just a teenager. Like, when was she supposed to get any kind of emotional relationship experience, you know?
Right, and that's why she's taking anything she can get aka Criston Cole. Same with him. He's also got no one else. I mean, that's the life of a Kingsguard, right? They don't have those relationships. They're not supposed to. And that's, a hard life for them. But this is realistic. It's human. That's why I don't have a problem with Alicent Cole being added as a thing. It just makes so much sense. They're good looking. They're lonely. They're around each other all the time. They're grieving. They have like complicated views on shame, and they're both have strange views on religion. Like Alicent thinks the gods are punishing them. That's from one perspective, it's very sad. Another, it's a little bit arrogant to think that the gods would single you out. Like those people were punished more than you, but this is how she's taught to think, and she thinks it's real. Not everyone can be Euron. Not everyone can go through experiments to prove the gods don't exist. Like, you know what? I'm going to kinslay. I'm going to do all these things that people say you can't do, and then I'm going to see that nothing happened, and I'm going to have confidence the gods aren't real. Alicent has not been through anything like that. All she has is she's lived around the trappings of the Seven and the faith all her life. She goes to light candles at the Sept like a good person of her culture should do or is taught to do, and to honor her ancestors and all that. But yeah. And she's worried on that side from Criston Cole, from her lover. She says, have you told anyone? And he's like, what do you take me for? And he says, a man who seeks absolution. And she's right to worry. Remember how quickly he confessed to the Rhaenyra affair back in season 1? He didn't need any prodding. Like she wasn't even asking him about that. And he confessed to it anyway. She was asking about something else. And he's like, yeah, I slept with her. And she's like, wait, what? So it's like, so Alicent has good reason to think Cole might spill the beans here.
Well, she's also projecting here because we then see her with Otto, and look, guess what? She's the one who's close to spilling the bean. Yep. That's why she asks.
You're right. Oh. So true. So true.
I was going to say it's a perfect example of someone expecting others to do what they would do. She's looking for absolution. Yeah. She wants to tell someone else. And so she's kind of expecting that he might have also.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's like, you're worrying, like people who lie expect other people to lie to them. Like liars expect other people to be liars, vindictive people expect other people to be vindictive, So yeah, so she's expecting Cole to feel that way. And to be fair, it's not totally, Shea is right that it's projection, but she does have logical reason for this too, given his past. Yeah. So she weeps for Helena, she weeps for Jaehaerys, but like Shea brought up, she has less concern for her son. She's also unable to comfort. She doesn't come off as heartless, like I said. It's just she's kind of helpless. And
do you think she's kind of afraid of Aegon?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. But I think it's just so much of it is just the way they're raised. It's a great point y'all made about her. She at first wants to confess it to Otto, and Otto asks, like, what sin? And she just doesn't say anything. And then later she says it, and by then he's probably had a chance to think about it. And he's like, I don't want to hear of it. So, which is another way to encapsulate politics over love. Like, she needs someone to confess to come clean to, someone she can trust. She needs to get this off of her chest. Like, she literally scratches herself on the chest as she brings it up. It's that physical manifestation thing of her picking at her nails and scrubbing that you brought up last week, Sean, that she was scrubbing herself in the bath and she couldn't get clean. It comes up here too. It's really great consistency of her like foibles or quirks as a character. But Otto isn't gonna, he's like, nope, it puts us at risk if I know. Like, if I don't know, then I can't spill the beans either. It's better to keep it a secret, which from a political perspective, you see his point, but from a father-daughter perspective, you don't.
From a father-daughter or maybe even just human or whatever kind of perspective, it might just be too much for him to deal with. He's already distraught in a bunch of ways, never mind the political implications. He might just not emotionally be able to handle anymore,
Yeah. And it's
like in general, a father doesn't want to hear about who his daughter's having sex with in general. I feel like that's a kind of
especially a religious conservative family, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but their dynamic has changed though. Like and it started to change last time, which is they are supporting each other more. Like they are more of a team, which is a reversal. They were at odds a lot in season 1. Now they're kind of together, which is a change from the Blacks, whereas Daemon and Rhaenyra were pretty tight season 1. Now they're the ones split. So that's a nice little mirror image there. One of many mirror images in this episode and this series. So Sir Criston, let's talk about him. Let's focus on him for a minute. A lot of people are like, he's not Sir. He's just... It's one of the saddest moments of the episode is him watching that little bed being taken apart. Like, that was like, man, they got us in the fields with that one. They really know how to just... That little thing, just the act of taking apart the little bed is so sad. It's like that phrase, what was it? Child shoes for sale, never worn. Like, oh my God, don't do that. So... It's one of the saddest moments of the episode. His acting is really good here, even though you're mad at him all the time, especially on rewatch when you know what he's going to do the second time through. Because one of the cringiest moments is him lambasting Sir Arik. But again, we'll save that for Wednesday. We'll hold on to your frustration for Criston Cole over that. But in general, does this change your view of Criston Cole? Does he seem more of a hypocrite or whatever? How do you see him now? What is it? This is basically pretty big moments in this episode regarding him.
It does. It clearly makes him more of a hypocrite, but it's in a way that I understand, if that makes sense. It's frustrating for him to do this, but people do this. People often do this, and it's
do what specifically? What do you mean?
Lash out at other people when they're really upset with themselves.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that is
when
human.
Someone realizes I've made a mistake. I have sinned. I've done something wrong. I've been a hypocrite. Well, let me find someone else being a hypocrite, and I'll tell it's there are definitely better ways to do this.
Wasn't being a hypocrite,
do it like this. But
Arik wasn't being a hypocrite though. He unleashed on him.
True.
That's not a hypocrite. That was just a punching
bag.
That was just pure blame.
What I meant really, he's looking for someone to go after, someone to take this internalized emotion outwardly, not necessarily for doing the same thing that he did.
Yeah.
But this is someone that maybe he in his own mind can justify, or maybe even legitimately have a little bit of concern about. It's not, I don't think he's being fair. I don't necessarily think this is the case, but even if Cole is aware enough that Eric wouldn't do this, is everyone? That's part of why I think he knows he can do this to him, because he knows he could turn the king or whoever against him. I think, and it's another thing I want to think about too, another sort of parallel you can draw, that Daemon felt like he needed to do something. This came in the wake of seeing this dead baby. Mm-hmm. And Cole, for all his flaws, he still wants to defend Alicent. He still, on some level, believes or needs to believe that he's doing the right thing for the right side. And these freaking blacks just killed a little boy. He's just like Daemon. I want revenge. I want to take action. I'm tired of these council meetings. I'm tired of Otto's patience.
But we rightly condemned Daemon for doing that. This is but we rightly condemned Daemon for that, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not justifying.
So we condemn Cole for this, of course, and the same for the same regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's an emotional, negative, unfair, hypocritical, dumb plan.
It's kind of dumb.
It's not well. Now, as much as I want to attack it for being a bad idea, it almost worked. It did almost work, right? It
worked better than Otto thought it would. That's for sure.
The difference there, and he would have got to her, even if he would have been killed immediately afterwards. So.
Yeah. It is really interesting because he confronts. It's funny because he confronts one of the few people that can rightly call his flaws, his specific mistakes out, whereas the council doesn't know exactly who's like they aren't sure exactly who was supposed to be where, but Arik does. He's like, why didn't you assign a guard to Helena? Like, that's your call. You're the one in charge of security. So I was remember how confident I was that he was supposed to be guarding them? I was technically wrong. So I was like, no, Sean, you're wrong. He was supposed to be guarding He was supposed to be guarding Helena. I was wrong, but it was his fault because he was the ones that was supposed to put a guard on her and just didn't. So the heirs were not guarded. That's just wild. So it is Cole's fault in that sense, and he is not taking responsibility for it. Mary, who we had on as a guest for Saturday, Maester Mary, had a great take on Cole and his patterns, which is that he is very willing to feel shame or guilt. He does feel it. He is not above that at all. But he doesn't feel responsibility for the things that make him feel shameful or guilty. And that is something that some characters do, but he doesn't. And that's part of why a lot of people don't like him, because he takes very little responsibility. And not only does he not take responsibility, he blames other people for it. We saw a little bit of that for Daemon. But Daemon it didn't go nearly as far in trying to blame someone else. He just tried to say it was a mistake. Like, oh, it was an accident. Whereas that's a different conversation, a different way to shirk responsibility.
He did do it,
but it's very
past,
similar.
though.
It's parallel.
Yeah, in that last episode, he tried to blame Rhaenys. He's like, you could have just killed them all there, and you didn't, and now we're in this situation. And then he tried to blame Mysaria, and she called him out, like, you're just blaming me because of your mistakes.
Okay, so wait, so I want to get a gauge on it, Sean, because people were very curious about how you would feel about Cole after this episode, or just, you know, your gauge. It seems like you're not as warm to him as you are, but it still seems like if I were to have you rank Daemon and Criston Cole, you're putting Daemon at like a 3 and Cole's still at like a 6 or whatever. There's a gap between them. They're not head and head, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I said I don't know if I said it on a stream, but I said to someone that last episode that Cole lost a notch to me, but Daemon lost 2. And Daemon was lower in the first place. I think in this episode, they each lost a notch to me. So, you know, he's, you know,
you don't think Cole lost 2 notches? He tried to send this is like a murder thing that he's, you know, the blaming people and everything. Like Daemon all he did was shirk responsibility. He didn't like order a murder plot.
Well, and he ordered a murder plot last episode.
Right,
Cole
which he fell 2 notches for. So why doesn't Cole fall 2 notches this episode? That's my point.
Yeah, the difference is I think that I think this murder plot is less bad. I think that this one is similarly poor thought out because the last one ended up with a child being killed.
But again, that wasn't like his intent, right? It wasn't, you know, and this could have gotten innocent people killed too. Like someone got in his way, a kid could have been killed.
Cole's intent here was to end the war. He thinks he may have some shrouded other.
No, hold on. Do we know that for sure? Do we actually know that?
That's what I'm saying. There's probably at least some other thoughts in his head.
Because we know. No, hold on. What I'm saying is, I don't know that he's honest when he's saying that. He's trying to get Arik to go. That doesn't mean he genuinely believes this will end the war. Because I don't think that's true. I don't think it would end the war, and I don't think that Criston Cole would believe that. I think he's just telling Arik that to do that. Jace would just be the king now.
It would just be
Jace would just be exactly. Jace would just be king, and Daemon would be king consort, former king, whatever. It definitely wouldn't stop the war.
I'm not saying he's full of thought it out or that he doesn't have some other ulterior motivations or clouded judgment and everything else. But it does make sense. And he said out loud, like, I guess Jace would be the king, but is the realm going to stay at war over this little boy?
Of course they would.
In question?
Yeah, they definitely would. People wouldn't support the blacks if they believed Jace was a bastard in the first place, because he's next, no matter, in any scenario, he's next.
I mean, they might, but what I'm saying is, even now, Rhaenyra is worried that her support is waning.
Yeah, absolutely,
right?
Sure.
So it wouldn't support Wayne even more if she wasn't even alive. You know, like, I'm not saying
it might not, because people might rather support a man. A lot of patriarchal Westeros might be happier to support Jace. So so it's not that simple. I don't think.
It's actually hilarious. It might have blown up in Cole's face if he had assassinated Rhaenyra and now is King Jace, and now King Jace has a clear path to the throne. I don't know. It might have worked out poorly.
Yeah, one way or the other, Daemon's plan was not to end the war, right? Even if Cole's plan was poor thought out and mixed up with other motivations, Daemon's plan was also poorly thought out and mixed up with other motivations and didn't even have the primary motivation of trying to end the war.
I don't think to me, that's not a distinguishing factor, because it wouldn't have ended the war either way. I don't think their intent matters when we don't know for sure what the intent was. And we do in Daemon's case. We don't in Cole's case. And we definitely know that the war wouldn't end because of it. He's just wrong. Like that. I think you have to include like basic intelligence here. And he didn't use that. He just expected it. He just went off half-cocked.
I would still rather support someone who is dumb than someone who is evil. And even if Cole and Daemon
they're both. Cole is dumb and evil.
Yes. Well, so is Daemon.
I don't know that Daemon is dumb. He's definitely evil. Well, he did evil things. They've both done evil things. Neither of them are pure evil guys, but yeah. Anyway, I do think the blood and cheese was dumb. Anyway, let's move on. We spent a lot of time on that one. It will be very interesting to see how Criston and Alicent's relationship is impact going forward. She hasn't yet reacted to what he's just done. And we don't know what that will be. And of course, he's the hand now, and all sorts of things are going to change between them. And yeah, Otto called it a prank. He was like, you didn't consult any of us about this prank before you left? And Alicent, I feel like, probably would have taken her father's side on that one. Here's another thing where Aegon's education would have really helped. The lack of education really hurt him. There had been a Lord Commander named Han not that long ago, and it went very badly. In fact, so that was Ryan Redwine, and he was in the season 1 briefly. He dies, I think, in episode 2 or 3, and he's standing behind Jaehaerys at the Great Council. So
you reminded me of another thing I wanted to make in an earlier scene when Aegon was destroying the model of Old Valeria.
Yeah,
I think that was also sort of symbolic, if you will, of him not only not paying attention to, but he's like destroying the past and the legacy of the Targaryens. Does that make sense? Like,
I think it's really just his father's legacy, not the Targaryens' legacy.
That too, yeah.
Because that's referred to specifically in this episode. Like, don't you remember thinking about your father? And he hated his father, so he's violently destroying his father's legacy, which he didn't like. He didn't want to be like his father, and now he has an excuse to just smash it all.
His anger, and I'm particularly thinking about this because of the line that is spoken to Daemon by the brothel woman. I don't know if we even have a name for her, but she's like, the angry princes.
You said Daemon. You meant Aemond.
Aemond. Sorry if I misspoke. Yeah. Angry princes end up hurting common people like me. And this is an example, like, that he is, I guess he's king at this point, but his, like, on a lot of levels, but just think of the time and work and effort. That one guy at this thing, like, stop, like in the background, like watching him destroy this, but also what it symbolizes, his father, his legacy, their history, on and on. And he's just mad in this moment and destroying all of it. And it continues. It's been happening and it keeps happening. Daemon did the same thing. It's Eric and Arik aren't exactly common people. Like the Cargyles are like a noble family.
Yeah.
But they are still relatively common compared to the royals.
Yeah.
And they are suffering to death for these angry princes,
Absolutely. Yeah. They're losing their temper and sending people off to do bad things. That, by the way, is a callback to Varys telling Ned, why is it always the innocents who suffer when you High Lords play your Game of Thrones? Very strong callback there. Very big moment. Very big line. Talking about actually, let's take a few questions here. Mick Floyd says, I was ready to kick Alicent's back in, but Tom and Aegon doesn't want anybody to see him as weak, so was her leaving while he was crying good parenting? Maybe that's possible, but I think maybe that's something that she would tell herself, but I think she just doesn't know how to comfort him. I think that's, regardless of what else might be going on, I'm pretty adamant that she doesn't know how to comfort him. So it definitely doesn't have to be just that, though. Like, why would it just be one thing? She should be having a confusing, complex set of emotions here. And I think that's a very valid potential possibility for one of them. He doesn't want to be seen as weak. Yeah, like some people want to be left alone when they're sad. That's not uncommon.
I don't want to argue too hard against that take, but there is a difference between being seen as weak to the public and being seen as weak to your mom,
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
But but still, she might recognize that he'll just get mad at her if she tries.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, maybe she should try. Despite that, I don't know, but yeah.
Whitney Lee sends a super chat. No question. Thank you, Whitney. And Jill47 says, it's odd that no one asked the queen to pick the rat catcher who did it so they didn't have to kill them all. I wouldn't say it's odd. I would say it's a function of just how single-minded and in a hurry Aegon is to get revenge.
I think they don't want to re-traumatize Helena, but I don't think it even crossed his mind.
Yeah, I don't
think it crossed his mind. I think if it had, he might not have wanted to go drag her to stare at a bunch of men in a lineup.
Yeah, he had the blinders on. He was presented with Blood. He beat him to death. Blood admitted that he worked with a rat catcher whose name he didn't know, just that it was one of the Red Keep rat catchers. Simple as that. There is no further thought. There's like, well, how can I get them as quickly as possible? There's no other steps needed. Just have them all killed. He just immediately had an answer that could satisfy him, even though it's a terrible way to handle it. It was quick, and he knew he could do it right away.
And remember Otto, when Larys came in with this information, and it seemed like Aegon wanted to go deal with himself, and Criston's like, hold on, and Otto's like, hey, make sure you get some information quick.
Don't just kill him right away.
No, yeah. Otto's worried about that, and he was correct to be, and I think Otto would have thought, whether he should have or not, to have Elena pick him out. I think Larys probably knew he could have done that. I think Larys wanted to give Aegon this moment of violence. I think Larys is trying to get on Aegon's side.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I think you're right. I mean, he already has tried to insert himself with the whole hand, like, that's your father's hand. Which, by the way, he uses almost the exact same wording when he fires Otto that Larys planted in him.
Gave him.
Yeah, he's like, he's your father's hand, not your hand. You know, he's like, you were my father's hand, not mine. He says, he just repeats it right back to him. No, but before that point, we have the shot outside of the rat catchers hanged. It's the first appearance of Ulf the White. We'll be seeing more of him later. Sean, you don't even know who that is, but he does matter. The first thing he does is steal something, so that gives you a little quick hint as to his character. We have a sad shot of the little dog sitting there, still loyal to Cheese. Cheese was killed. There's Ulf. And there's the little dog. Aw, poor loyal doggo. Hopefully he finds someone that won't kick him to be his next companion. So this is done pretty quickly. We see this. The guy, Ulf, asks, what did they do? And no one says anything. We just cut to this council chamber where Otto is already enraged. He finds out. He comes in. He's like, what did you do to the rat catchers? And this is his big, it's giving the worst person you just know made a great point energy. Because Otto makes several great points here. Of course, we can't help but notice that so much of this was set up by him in the first place. His own arrogance had a lot to do with this scenario happening in the first place. He created the conditions that allowed a lot of this happening. He's, more than anyone, is why Aegon is on the throne. But he wanted to avoid Daemon because he feared another Maegor the Cruel. And he's telling all his opponents that this is Rhaenyra the Cruel. But the most Maegor-like thing done in this episode was hanging the rat catchers. Like Maegor hung all the builders, or hanged, sorry Stannis, hanged all the builders after building the very tunnels Blood and Cheese just used to sneak through. Oh man, yeah, Maegor's paranoia got more Targaryens killed. The Red Keep, when has those tunnels ever helped Targaryens? I don't think it's only ever hurt them. So, yeah. I got more to say about this, but Sean, go ahead and weigh in before I just say all of it at once.
I think that this is maybe another example of this theme. I don't know if projection is the right word, but like Otto's mad at himself. I think he knows a lot of this is his fault.
Good point.
And he's taking it out on Aegon. And now Aegon did do a bad thing, but I was kind of surprised at the insults he was throwing at him. He kept pushing it, both the anger and both the sentiment and the actual words were really pushing it.
He's never been like this, right? He's never lost his composure like this. This was very different. Yeah, it was.
And snapped. That is maybe part of it is he also hasn't had his chance to grieve his grandson being killed and the effect that that's had on his granddaughter and the efforts, we'll say sacrifices, maybe his personal sacrifices to kind of swallow these emotions. He hasn't allowed himself to grieve because he feels like there are these things he has to, this duty he has for the long-term good of the realm and the people and his family and his children. And he's been sucking it up and making these tough decisions. And this stupid kid is ruining it all. And like, have you thought about your father? Like, my father said I should be king. I made you king.
Yeah. And that was a very dumb thing to say because, as we just said, he doesn't really like his father. Bringing up his father's legacy is an insult. He's like, I don't want to be like that. That was a poor choice.
Yeah, Otto, you did make him king. You made this man who killed 100 innocent men, 99 innocent men or whatever. You made him king. You did that. Live with it. Live with it, Otto. Yeah, hate him.
Yeah, but in this moment,
talk about
hypocrisy.
It.
Yeah. But in this moment, unlike pretty much every other moment, he can't control his emotions. And in a lot of those other moments, it almost makes him seem cruel or cold. But here, when he lets it go, he still seems cruel and cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the timing is just wrong because Aegon's already got these seeds planted. And Otto's just harvesting them without realizing it.
I love it. It's such a great scene. His acting is so good that just the way he unleashes. He calls him feckless. Feckless, Sean. He claims Aegon has no feck, not a speck of feck. in that man.
He doesn't give one.
He doesn't give any feck. I actually honestly do not know what feckless means. I've seen it written a million times, but it's just context always kind of semi-explains it. But it
I realized what I was about to say also is just context. I think it's like regard or control.
Oh, yeah. That certainly fits. Anyway, it's very on point. Yeah, he's yelling at him. He's can't stop the insults. And like how Aemond refers to his own mother as Alicent, though in private, he's calling him Aegon. In the council meeting, he does that too. He does it here and in the council meeting. He's still thinking of him as his grandson, like the kid he put on the throne. He doesn't call him Your Grace. And that might have helped a little bit. But it's just all these, the insults piling up and Aegon being like, just can't handle it. He's like, I'm handling this better than you all of a sudden. Because that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Aegon's demeanor has shifted dramatically by the time the scene rolls around. He feels like he's a little satisfied, maybe because he killed the rat catchers. He's taken action. He's no longer melting down, and he's drinking heavily.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say, is that he feels a measure of control as anyone would. He actually did do something right here. He did multiple things, actually. He beat Blood to death, presumably. He killed 100 men, and he sent Criston off to... he sent Criston to send Auric off to kill Rhaenyra. Yeah. Right? Like, he has enacted 3 acts that is more than has happened so far in his whole reign. So, yeah.
And he responds to that saying, rather backing up, he says, Aegon also points out that, what have you done? I want to spill blood, not ink. And all you've done is curry the favor of fishwives. And he's like, no, like the whole realm is hearing about this. He's like, it's not just you think that only the people in King's Landing that saw the body care. No, look, everyone's telling everybody. Word's going to spread. It's going to take a little while, but you just upended all that. You just ruined our ethical advantage in front of everybody. Like we were the good guys because they killed a child, and we had the upper hand with the propaganda, and now we don't. Is Otto's point? Whether that's actually true or not remains to be seen. But you tend to trust Otto's judgment on things like this. He's not an idiot. He's dishonest. He's ambitious, but he's not a fool. He's, it's the same kind of thing with like a Tywin who was also Hand of the King. You wouldn't trust Tywin to not be ruthless or violent, but you would trust Tywin to act rationally within the framework he's shown you before.
That one line that Otto said, that his death could be worth more than 1,000 nights on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought about that a lot because, if, I don't know what the number would have to be, but let's say 1 in 100 potential soldiers that were going to join Rhaenyra's cause, now they don't. And if there were 10,000 people that were going to, well, that's 1,000 that don't. If you had 1,000 knights go kill one person each, well, if you get 1,000 people to not join, that don't need to be killed, and might be even more than that, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the idea that, like, you don't even have to equip and send those knights out and wait for them to get to the battlefield, right? You just have to send one raven can affect 1,000 people 200 miles away. Like, I think that was a very good assessment by Otto. But now, if each one of those rat catchers had one brother and one son or one uncle or whatever who were now not going to join the green side because they're mad what the king did, he just canceled out the value.
He really did. Yeah, and that'll be the rumor. That's what spreads. Like this is what happens. This is your loyalty to and this is what his magnanimity towards the, I shouldn't even use that word because I can't say it. All his goodwill towards the common people is just, he just murdered 99 and he's like, you strike at me, I strike back at you. Like he's treating them like a monolith, like they did it. Like, no, it wasn't them. It was just one of them. It was really Daemon, but he's treating them like they're some sort of group that arranged this together. Which is just the height of paranoia, insanity. I don't know which. It's not rational. It's not smart, but it's also not unexpected that this kind of behavior would come from a person like this, person raised like this, a person with these values.
Which, brings me to your answer, Aziz, to Jill when you said, no, I don't think it's odd for Aegon to not show Helena. You're right, Jill, 47. that's what a rational person would do. If Otto had charge of this, he probably would have done that, or any number of things. There's probably a number of solutions here that didn't involve killing 100 men and publicly hanging them.
One other callback to A Song of Ice and Fire here is Jaime getting mad at Cersei for killing the guards who Varys drugged. Varys drugged some guards and went and did the business down in the black cells, and then they went, with Tyrion and all that, right? And then Cersei finds out, and the first thing she does is order the death of the guards that fell asleep. And Jaime's like, "You idiot! We should have questioned those guards. Like something happened, like what? Now we don't know. We have no idea if what they saw. We could have killed them after we questioned them, but this is big. This is Cersei energy right here. Aegon just not thinking and just only thinking of revenge and violence and getting back at the people that did this, and not thinking exactly what's the line that Otto says. He says, "He has not the long view." I love that.
That's a good line.
Yeah, and it's right in the same conversation where Alicent also kind of downplays. Like that's really downplaying it. He does not the long view, like saying he's very short-sighted. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. But Alicent says, "Sir Criston is not temperate." Yeah, you don't say. Sir Criston is not temperate.
The thing she says after that, though, is that he's dedicated. You can't deny his dedication, which
his loyalty, maybe.
Yeah, his loyalty, his dedication. Anyways, which
to her,
yeah.
But really, this is a parallel, because this is kind of like when Aemon was lambasting his mother in front of Cole, and Cole's like, "Nah, it's all Rhaenyra's fault." This is kind of the same thing, where they're like, Cole and Aegon together, those two idiots will just run the realm into the ground. And she's like, "Sir Criston is not temperate." This is like, hold on, let's just dial it back a little bit. That's my lover you're talking about. She's not quite as bad. She's not as just. Kristen's way worse. She blames it all on Rhaenyra. She's a little more nuanced about it, but still.
I think, by the way, that Otto said they have not the long view, not he, because I think he was talking about
both
Aegon,
of them,
Criston, and Aemond also. That all three of them are just.
I think he said he, but you're right that he.
Remember.
You're right either way, whether he said it or not.
Also, real quick, Feckless is in the realm of unqualified, incompetent, irresponsible.
Oh, okay.
It's Feckless.
Lacking feck. So if I want to say someone doesn't have any skill at something, it's like, you have no feck at this.
I think we all knew I guess Aziz and I both knew what the word feckless meant. We were asking what the root of the word feck is.
I could not, without,
to be clear,
quickly while trying to keep up with this, I could not find feck, but I could find feckless. So
yeah, we knew that
it
word.
might be a word that didn't have less added to it. It might have had some other origin. That sometimes happens. But
so Aegon wasn't well educated into being king. You know who hasn't been educated as Hand of the King? The new guy, Criston Cole. What experience does this guy have? And the one order he's given so far, though technically he wasn't Hand when he gave the order to Sir Ark, if this is any indication of his ability. And we already saw him talk to Aemond about a campaign plan to go, attack the Crown Lands and all that. So we can pretty much expect that to be one of the first things he suggests. One last thing with Otto and Aegon. Another sign of Aegon's weakness is the use of the classic saying, "You are dismissed," to someone who's already walking away.
I did like that moment because it was a little bit of a reminder to Otto.
Yeah.
Like it and maybe to Aegon himself. Like, he is kind of asserting himself, and it may be after the fact, but he did want to remind Otto that I am the king. I'm not joking. You really are out of here, But anyone who has to remind someone he's the king is no true king. It comes back to that.
So Aegon smashes a lot. You go ahead, yeah.
One other quick point is and again, I'm way down on where I was for Criston Cole, and I've never been that high on him in the first place, except for how handsome he is. He does have more down on him than Daemon relatively, but it is possible. Not knowing how this pans out, I can easily find myself with my foot in my mouth or eat my words in a couple weeks. But in this moment of war, he might be a good hand. He might, if the main thing they need to be deciding is how to manage battles, he might be better than Otto. Now, I immediately can see the counterpoint to that is he hasn't really been to war. Just because you're good at fighting with
Neither
your
is
sword
Otto,
and your
but yeah.
lance doesn't mean you're good at managing the battlefield troops. So we'll see about this.
Like, they don't have really anyone who's got that skill. That's part of the problem here. Is like, yes, you're right. Otto might be even worse than Criston Cole, who at least has some martial experience. At least has probably read some books about strategy and talked about it. It's at least like in his wheelhouse, even if he has no experience at it.
Aemon's probably read the most about it. I would guess that Aemon has the most like book learning on war strategy.
He has studied the blade and philosophy and history.
He said so. We should believe him.
And more on books a bit later. We've got a pretty cool scene with Rhaenyra in the library, but we're not quite there yet. So Aegon smashed a lot of things. The model, a table, blood, his father's legacy, several glasses, and he plans to smash more with his new steel fist of a hand, which that's a book line. My new hand will be a steel fist. That's George R. Martin writing right there. By the way, another great moment. It kind of got lost in the shuffle of all the great acting. You know who was actually quite good in his limited time? Blood. The Gold Cloak, like his voice went from that menacing, gravelly evil to guy who's rightfully afraid he's going to be tortured and killed, which he, again, rightfully so. Yeah, that he got lucky that it was actually pretty quick. And his trembling and his just all the anxiety in his voice. Great job. Curtis Frank says ineffective leads to the word effectless, which leads to the word feckless. Okay, so it could be fectless, but it was changed to feckless. Okay, so you have no effect. You have, someone that's ineffectual. Similar, I suppose. Very good. Thank you, Curtis. If you are a person that's enjoying our coverage and you appreciate what we're bringing to the table here, then why not join us on Patreon? We do rely a lot on the support of the community. We are not a big enough channel to get lots of ad revenue. We do get some, but it's, less than it could be. Not enough to certainly put all the wind in our sails. And so if you want to join, go to historyofwesteros.com. There's lots of links to how to support us, including a link to Patreon, or just go straight to patreon.com/historyofwesteros. We've got a lot of different levels you can sign up at. Bonus episodes, got quite a lot of those. We also have things like shout-outs, access to our notes, the occasional patrons-only gathering, and other good things like that. Once again, it's patreon.com/historyofwesteros. You can find the link in the description. Most of the rest of this episode we'll spend on the other side of Blackwater Bay, with a few exceptions. Let's head over to the Black Council, Dragonstone. Rhaenyra just can't believe people would think her capable of this. There's a little bit of naivete. She's not understanding that, they don't know you. They don't know that you're a good person. You don't have a well-defined personality to the common folk of all over Westeros or the nobility. Yeah, they got to know you a little bit when you were younger, but this is the part of politics that she's not grasping fully. It happened in the first episode where her leadership being paralyzed meant that they were unable to capitalize on this event of her son's death in the way that Otto almost capitalized on it for the Greens before Aegon kind of threw that off. But Aegon pointed out in the meeting, who else could it be? Exactly. That's what people are going to think. Your son was just killed. One of their sons is just killed. Everyone's going to think of you first. And the fact that she doesn't recognize that immediately is a little bit of a flaw in her reasoning. Alfred Broom, who is very rude about it and doesn't read the room very well. It's his first appearance, by the way, this Alfred Broom. He says, actually, some of us kind of did think you could have done that in haste. And Rhaenyra gives him the just hard stare, like, really? Really? You really thought that? And Rhaenys gives the mind yourself without even looking at him. And it's like, ooh, that's commanding right there.
I thought that was interesting, by the way, that she might have also at least a little bit have been talking to Rhaenyra.
A little bit, yes.
I think there's a chance Rhaenyra is about to have that guy executed.
Not executed, but maybe something. I don't know.
Kicked off the council at least, like, calm down. Our whole trouble here is overreactions. Let's not overreact in anyone. So.
Yeah. So Daemon's silence throughout this meeting is kind of what gives it away. You've got Lord Celtigar saying some things. Broom says his things. Let's actually mention Celtigar first. He's the one who says, yeah, I already doubled the guards. Because he knows too. He's like, yeah, they're going to come for us. Of course they are. He understands that. And then he says something else that's obvious. It must be said that the damage to our position is immeasurable. Yeah, it is hard to measure because they don't know, but it's also a big deal. Right? Part of it's just lack of understanding. Part of it is this is bad, right? But yeah, Daemon's silence and kind of smug face gives it away. And next thing you know, the room has been cleared. Well, the room isn't cleared. They go to Rhaenyra's private quarters and have a conversation there. A room we get very familiar with in this episode because we're in there several times and we have a fight in there. Well, an argument and a fight. A war of words and a war of swords. So it's a great argument. It's fantastic and realistic. The way they kind of walk around and stalk and yell and the red face and the frustration barreling through. Rhaenyra is relentless, even though she's a little afraid of him. Even after he gets a little physical with her, she still calls him pathetic, which is like, yeah, you go. Like, don't be afraid of him.
That's my favorite part of the episode.
Calling him pathetic.
Yes.
Nice.
I thought it was telling that there was a moment when he kind of moved toward her and she reeled back because he choked her. Yeah. Right? That's like
last
another
season, yeah.
notch that Daemon has lost in the past that keeps him lower than Criston.
You're right.
She jumps when he slams that door, too. She's like, like jolts.
Yeah. Also, another continuing with the sort of motif of losing control behind closed doors, kind of like we saw with the Greens. It's happening here. Like,
very good.
She's realizing that Daemon did this, and we don't see how that plays out in that room, but probably pretty short, even if everyone realizes Daemon was probably behind it. But she gets everyone out, and behind closed doors, they have it out with each other. So.
Yeah. Now, I think Daemon is loyal to her, but just they have differing ideas of what loyalty means. He thought he was loyal to his brother, and like, in a lot of ways he was. Yes, he undermined him in ways and went against him in ways. But if it had ever come to war, he'd have been the first one at his brother's side. And that's what he's thinking of. That's what he's thinking. He's like, yeah, no, we're at war. I'm on your side. I'm about to go lead troops for you. That's the point he brings up. He's like, how can you doubt that I'm on your side? Well, it's not that she doubts fully that he's on her side. It's that she doubts how he expresses this, how he takes action to support her, and how they are very much on the same page about what that means and what she wants from him.
And in the same way with Viserys too. Like, yes. He is loyal in his way, which is only physical violence in the short term. He's not loyal in any long-term sense. And she even kind of calls him out on it that he starts with her. He does the I don't know, something that people often do, the projection thing or whatever. You blame someone else for doing what you're really doing, right? Yes. He's like, you know, how did he say?
You're afraid to spill blood.
No. Your dad was using you to keep me from being right.
Yes,
that's
from overshadowing him. Yeah, he was afraid of me.
Right, yeah. Right. And the fact is that she's saying, she didn't say this, but what I believe is that he's using her. She kind of like puts it out there. She's like, look, do you accept me as your queen and ruler? And he doesn't give a straight answer. His response is, I'm about to go raise an army for you, because the answer is, he wants to use her. He wants to use her name, his position as her king consort, to do what he wants. Just like he did with Viserys. Mm-hmm. I'm the king's brother. You can't stop me. I'm sure he's loyal to Viserys, but he's really using his brotherhood to the king to do whatever he wants. And he's still doing it with her, and she can't trust him because she thinks, I think correctly, he's going to keep doing that. Even when the war's over and they win, assuming they win, then what? She's still going to have the same problems with him that Viserys did. She's still going to have the same problems with him she's having right now. Yeah. He's not going to stop. She can't really trust him. He's not really loyal. He's only loyal to the extent that he gets to keep his own power, autonomy, ego, whatever else.
Yeah, and it's really well said. They really get at some really important points here. The point about fear versus trust is super well done. Like, Daemon was like, no, he was afraid of me. And she's like, no, he didn't trust you. He wanted to rely on you, but he couldn't. It wasn't because he was afraid of you overshadowing him. It was because he was afraid of what you would do that didn't agree with what he would do. And then that would reflect on him. Things like this, things like blood and cheese. Yeah. And at first, she's not fully grasping that actually given the responsibility she's given him, actually she does too bear responsibility for Jaehaerys' death. She believes her careless wording is partly to blame here. So she's taking responsibility when there's only a little bit to take. Maybe there's a little more than a little, but she's taking it. Whereas Daemon is trying to absolve himself entirely, where clearly he's more directly involved. He clearly bears more responsibility than she does. No matter what percentages you assign, his percentage is higher. And he's trying to shirk that while she's trying to accept her share. Again, it's like Daenerys in A Dance with Dragons at Meereen. Until a shepherd brings her actual child's bones, she doesn't realize how dangerous her dragons really are. In this case, it's not a literal dragon posing the danger she didn't recognize. It's Daemon. Daemon is the dragon that's out of control here. Daemon is Drogon. He needs to be reined in, but can he be? We once compared Daemon to Achilles in an episode, Parallel Lives episode, and that's apt here again. In the movie Troy, Agamemnon says Achilles can't be controlled, but Nestor, his advisor, says we don't need to control him. We need to unleash him. And that's basically what happens here. He kind of unleashes himself. He's just like, he leaves and just go, I'm okay, I'm unleashed now, fine, I'm going. And presumably he's going to Harrenhal in the Riverlands, and we'll see what happens. But this is a better use of his talent. Like you said, maybe Criston's better in the field than he is ruling, because he's clearly not very good at ruling. Like, he has no experience. He might do better in the field. Daemon, maybe as well. Like, if it's just about fighting and winning the war and killing soldiers, and he might not muck it up so badly. If you're leaving him to make political decisions, then it's probably going to go badly. But this, maybe this will work. And that's kind of reflected by the later conversation with Corlys and Rhaenys, where they clarify some of this. It's like, do you think he'd go against Rhaenyra? And she's like, no, not like that. He just won't always be obedient. He'll just always do his own thing and just try to, like you said, he'll just try to get away with what he can using her as a cover, which that's a very good way to put it, Sean. And I think Rhaenys was kind of trying to say the same thing, but in different terms.
And Rhaenyra herself kind of says it too when Baela says, "What of my father?" And she says,
I don't know.
He's got to chart his own course. That's what she says.
Yeah, hopefully he's going to help us, but we'll see. Hopefully he's still on our side. But she probably doesn't really think he's gone off. It's like, she doesn't expect he's going to turn on them. But again, like, in what way is he going to help? It's who knows.
With help like Daemon's, with friends like Daemon, who needs enemies?
All right. So this is again to bring up Criston, Cole, and Alicent. This part line hasn't gone as far, because Alicent doesn't know what Criston's capable of yet. She just knows he's not temperate. She doesn't know what he just did regarding Eric Arryn, and she doesn't know what he'll do next now that he's Hand of the King. So she also bears some responsibility for kind of knowing she has a hold over him, and maybe not realizing what her hold over Criston means. Like, oh, what's he going to do in my name when I'm not looking? Or what's he going to do when I'm just, because he thinks it's what I want? Same thing's happening here with Daemon and Rhaenyra, except it's less about what Daemon thinks Rhaenyra wants. It's what Daemon thinks Rhaenyra needs. Rather than, it's a little, the dynamics are similar, but they're definitely not identical.
And real quick, a knock on Alicent is that she should already be worried about this, because it's happened with Larys. Multiple times he did something a lot more conniving or dreadful than she expected when she was kind of giving him guidance. And he went like 2 steps farther than she thought considered would even happen. And so with that experience, she should be, I think, a little more worried about what might happen with Cole as well.
Shout out to our good friends at the TKOK Podcast Network. Hey, Tommy, sending hearts and geese and a mirror and swords crossing and a headstone, which can only refer to the Cargill twins. Some of his favorites.
As I said in the chat, Tommy is just like Helena with her drawings and whatnot. And she wrote in her journal, the goose kills its own reflection. And now we can say that was the Cargill twins. Their sigil is a goose. A golden goose is the sigil of House Cargill. That's what he's referring to with his maybe cryptic emojis to y'all. Well
done, Tommy. Rhaenyra alone, we've got some shots of her. This is probably the scene you were most thinking of, Sean, when you talked about just seeing people thinking. This one, to me, of all of them, stands out the most because of that great camera work of going from one eye to the other of hers, and how when she's with her children, Aegon and Viserys, she can't smile even when she's with her kids because she's worried. Like, are they targets now? these children of hers that now that Alicent or now that Helena's children have been targeted, from their perspective, are they going to come after her kids? That's dangerous.
Yeah, I had so many thoughts in this sequence here that didn't really have any dialogue, just this imagery, because it was right in the mix of when I wish I might be juxtaposing some of the scenes, but I feel like it was the same time period when Aegon and Helena didn't quite know how to interact with each other.
Mm.
Right?
Yes, you're right. That's what you can see when I flip through them. It's going back.
And then
Good catch.
you see Rhaenyra with her kids and maybe forming a better bond than the Greens are. It seemed like Helena was with the kids a lot, and Rhaenyra's trying, but is she going to fail too? I don't know. And it's ironic, I think, that she's giving them dragons. She's like, here, it's not a toy. You know what I mean? She's like giving these dragons to play with. I don't know how symbolic that's supposed to be of like what has happened to the Targaryens in general. Is she still doing it? Is she questioning it at this moment? And in the scene, it has her sort of looking to the light, but looking sort of upward at a window where light is coming through, and the camera doesn't even move. It kind of just shifts focus from one eye to the other. But when it goes back to the light, you can see, I don't know, dust in the air. They spent so much time on this moment. I feel like it's got to mean something. And maybe it's just a pacing thing, but when it's over an hour long, I feel like it needs to have a deeper meaning. And I haven't quite decided yet, but one of my thoughts is maybe that even the light is not pure, that, that the sort of dust or debris in the air, like that nothing is pure, that she's questioning what she thought was pure or good or right. And she has questioned before already whether or not she should be the heir. Is this worth it? And then we cut from that to Alicent sinking into the water. She's drowning herself rather than looking to the light, drowning herself. And again, the way those scenes came one after another with no dialogue, no action, just as imagery. I don't know if anyone out there has any thoughts or ideas, or maybe there's some foreshadowing that, I swear to God, if Alicent drowns herself, I even started thinking about that Dalton Greyjoy that's supposed to come into the mix. So is somehow he going to cause Alicent to die? I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching too far, but those are the thoughts that stirred in me in these still moments. I also watched it 3 times, so
You'll have some
I'm
thoughts.
picking up on new things, So
yeah,
I was curious, like as Rhaenyra looks at her 2 sons, is she just like overcome with gruesome imagery? Like that's kind of what I was thinking, is that she's trying to not picture her sons decapitated, but it has to cross her mind, right? Like how do you not have that on your mind?
I agree, especially because she says, why would I do that to Helena of all people? Like she's like, if I was going to target someone, why would it be her kids? Like that's kind of insane. Like why wouldn't I go after Aegon or Aemon? Exactly. Like why wouldn't she go after the people who kind of were the target that was sloppily handled? So if we go over to backing up, I would love as well to echo what Sean said. If y'all have takes on these sort of dialogueless scenes that seem to suspend time and slow things down in an episode that is jam-packed. So that's a good point as well, Sean, about how they took the time to do this even in an episode that was really kind of stretched out. So I do appreciate that, and I would love to hear other other interpretations is the word I was looking for. If we return real briefly to the Driftmark interlude with Rhaenys and Corlys, we've had a few of these bed scenes. This is like their thing to have us get them talking in bed, which is a sign that they're one of the very few relatively healthy couples in the entire series. One of the few couples that's doing all right. They're still like having conversations in bed. Like compare that to Aegon and Helena, who can barely talk to each other at all, or Alicent, who can't comfort her own son, or Otto can barely comfort his own daughter. And these two.
Think about Alicent's probably not having any bedside bed conversations with Cole. They just like slap each other up and go at it. I don't know.
And then they're worried about getting caught, and they're like, let's get out of here, like panic. They can't just take any moment like this, because every moment they're in bed together is a risk of getting caught. These two can be like, we've been married for a long time. We can do this.
Can I say Rhaenyra, Alicent, Rhaenys, please command me.
Right? Isn't that's the joke in this moment, right? He says he makes a joke about being a sub and how it's not so bad, you know. He's like, it works out for me just fine. That was a good joke. I love how the Dragon Riders make it much easier for characters to they can do scenes in multiple places without it being like, Littlefinger's in his teleporter again. How the heck did he get all the way there? Varys teleported to Slaver's Bay. How the heck did he do that? But because Rhaenys was just at Dragonstone, and then now she's over at Driftmark. But that, as a Dragon Rider, that makes perfect, like, why not? Like, that's fine.
Also, they're not really that far away either.
No, they're not. They're island next to each other. Yeah, it's really not that far. Now, and of course, we could think maybe Corlys is at Dragonstone, but no, we haven't seen him there yet. He wasn't at the council meeting. He wasn't around at any of those other scenes, so pretty sure he's still at Driftmark. Baela and Jace, let's talk about them. This is a nice conversation. We don't get a lot of these conversations between the core characters. Obviously, these are very important characters, but they're not tier 1 in terms of their screen time. And it's these scenes are, well, we really like them. We want more of them. She skips dinner for crossbow practice. She's deep in her feelings. It's a conversation mostly about fatherhood, which this episode is heavy on fatherhood themes. Baela says she has kind of a love-hate relationship with Daemon and kind of explains that a little bit. Doesn't go too deep with it. It's kind of, some of it's kind of self-explanatory. You got to get the sense that they don't spend a lot of time together, but he's protective, that kind of thing.
Worth pointing out, something I don't think we actually noted in the scene between Baela and Rhaenyra is that when she goes in to see Rhaenyra, she notes the broken debris on the ground. She sees that there was a fight between Daemon and Rhaenyra, and it was in conflict, which she kind of already knew because as Daemon storms past her and doesn't even say a word, she knew he was in a bad mood. She sees that he yelled and broke something, and who knows how many times Baela growing up has seen Daemon rage at something, like when they're off in Pentos, like, was he happy, or did he sometimes have some fights and yell and break something? I don't know. It might have brought back a lot for her. So yeah, I think she was very much thinking about her relationship with her father right then and there.
That's a great point, and I would say that it's kind of hard for me to imagine that Daemon and Laena never had arguments. Like, she is very strong-willed, strong personality, so it's like kind of hard to imagine that they didn't have a few fights. And it's not hard to imagine that maybe Laena was the more mature one in those conversations or arguments or whatever, and maybe Baela would have seen her mother's side more. But again, that's mostly just guessing. So that's also a great point, and something that ties them together here in this moment that is a little interesting. Jace asks for permission to go do the scouting job that Rhaenyra gives to Baela instead, which I think is a little interesting. Maybe she's a little does she trust Baela more, or more worried about Jace, or both? Also, Jace is the heir to the throne, so you need to be more careful with him. So, but again, it's the question of what's the queen and what's the mother here, right? Yeah. There's a dual role that she has, just like everybody else in this episode. It's in the balance being a parent with being a ruler, which is giving the orders here, or which is taking prominence here. I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would say you could make an argument either way. You could say that Rhaenyra keeping Jace from action right then is the sensible ruler decision, or you could say that that's the mother speaking. Like, you could argue either, and I would agree. I don't think one is a slam dunk decision. What I think you can say is that she does see Baela as more expendable. Yeah. Frankly,
Baela might also be more experienced too, right? I wish I knew better, but when did she claim her dragon versus when Jace got his? How much more time in a cockpit does she have, so to speak?
They're like the exact same age, basically, if I remember correctly. So it's not that won't help settle this, but yeah, I think it's possible she was a dragon rider first. I don't recall off the top of my head.
And you can imagine she might have pushed harder to impress her dad to be a dragon rider, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that the mother is given the command to not let Jace go, but the queen has the excuse of, you're the heir, we can't risk it. That's how
the two, you can't separate them. That's a great way to put it, because even as much as we're trying to separate them, you can't. It's the same individual making these decisions, and we don't know.
I think she knows as a mother that someone would argue you're just trying to protect him. But she has the excuse as the queen of he's the heir. We need to be protective. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's certainly a little of each, but it makes the decision easy for her.
Yes.
I also want to point out just how competent and capable they are showing Baela to be, and military-minded, fighting-minded, in that she made a lot of shots on these posts. She's been practicing, she's been training, and she's good. We have to imagine you will see her in combat of some sort and see these skills in action.
How could she be in combat? She was told to keep her distance.
Who could know? Who can say? I mean, yeah. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
She's not hot-headed at all. Her father isn't hot-headed. Targaryens aren't known to be hot-headed. That she would never do anything she's not supposed to do.
She didn't have a deleted scene where she yelled at her aunt for not being more aggressive about the war effort. No, not at all.
So, wait, her dragon is Moondancer?
Correct.
Was that Moondancer that we saw flying, that Adam saw flying?
No, that was Sea Smoke.
No?
That was Sea Smoke.
That was Sea Smoke.
Yes,
okay.
That was Laenor's dragon, who was mentioned here.
I'm jumping ahead, but I was a little confused by what was happening in that scene.
That's okay, because Laenor is mentioned in this scene, because it's Jace's quote-unquote father, the cover story father, and Baela asks, that's her uncle. Laenor is her uncle. She's like, yeah, what about my uncle? And Jace is like, yeah, he taught us how to fish, and he liked cake. And then she asks about Sir Harwin Strong. It's a very touching moment where he's like, yeah, he was called Breakbones. He was fierce. I think he loved me. And she's like, of course he loved you.
He was your dad.
We all know he was your dad. We all. My bad. Did I say that out loud? I thought I was thinking that. They share a moment over Luke. And it's a good scene. It's like I said, good to have these two together, and I hope we get more. Let's talk about that little, since you mentioned it, let's talk about Alan and Adam and the little moment with Sea Smoke there. Starting with Alan and Adam. So this is on the other side of the blockade, right? They're talking about goat stew and having food and all that, which is a parallel or a mirror image of the scene with Hugh Hammer and Kat, which we'll talk about next, where they're talking about food starting to go low in the blockade because of the blockade. So this is life on the opposite sides of the blockade. And it builds on what they talked about last time, but it kind of deepens the mystery a little bit. Alan expresses hesitation in sailing with Corlys. And Adam says, come on, man, it's the best chance you've got to make your claim, to make your fortune, especially given what he owes you, especially given what he owes us. So you can understand the you, because it's already been established that Alan saved Corlys' life, but what does he owe them? And it's his brother. And Adam is a shipwright. So what's your latest take on this? Actually, let me ask you the latest take on this after we discuss this quick Sea Smoke scene. So he's just grabbing crabs and mussels, maybe more stuff for his stew, right? And then the dragon just appears, circling around him. We're left wondering what's on his mind and on what's the dragon's mind. Like, what's going on here? So give us your takes on both Adam and Sea Smoke and Adam and Alan and this deepening mystery around
And
Lord
a shout
Corlys.
out to the great reflective dragon scene, which is how we see the dragon at first in the reflection on the water and the sand, which is just a stunning moment and shot, hard to really fully capture in a screenshot, but just really cool. Just that.
Yeah, I am similarly perplexed as I was last time. There's clearly something here they're holding back from telling us that is probably going to become integral, if not central. I thought that he owes us. I was like, oh, us. What is it that he owes? And why is Alan so reluctant to claim it? And Alan seems to have given a reason. He's like, this is war, man, real war. Like, this isn't just like we're gonna go beat up on some pirates. This is like a real war is coming. And I think Adam at one point even said, this is your chance to distinguish yourself. And in my mind, before he even said that, I was taking note of the scars on Alan's face. And when he said it, like, I think this dude has already distinguished himself, like, and I'm hoping, I right now, I feel like I might align myself with this character if he just doesn't want to be part of another war. I think it's understandable, especially if you've already seen a lot of violence and know that people are going to die. Maybe people close to him have already died. And he just, I just want to sail a ship and fish and explore. I don't want to be mixed up with violence. I think all these lords fighting over the throne is nonsense in the first place, and I don't want to be part of it. I'm wondering, hoping if that's what his angle is, and maybe Adam is a little more young and naive and hasn't distinguished himself yet, and so looks at war as the chance, just like a lot of these other characters do, and it always frustrates me. I think there's sometimes when some terrible injustice has occurred and you need to, it comes to violence. I get, but I don't know if this war is over a terrible injustice. This is about the rich getting richer. You know what I mean? Rich people arguing over who should be the top rich person, and everyone else is getting sucked into a war over it. So
agree. That's a very good point. Yeah. So you can see why you don't want people to join this and don't be a part of this awful scenario. Like, why would you do that? Yeah. Good take. I appreciate that. And yeah, this plot line continues to build, and we'll continue to ask you questions about it, see what your take is, because we have, of course, know a lot about where it's going, but I like the way they've kept this hidden. It enables us to quiz you and see how it looks to a show-only person. You're not technically a show-only person, but you are show-only for House of the Dragon. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the other side of the blockade, Hugh Hammer and his wife, Kat. We actually see Kat during the procession. She's one of the people that we see in the crowd, and that's kind of neat because you might not have seen that otherwise. It's a very deep cut, right? She's right there. You can see the flowers passing by, and part of the little.
Didn't they say that
procession.
Was hops? Technically, in the behind the scenes, like
they were dropping hops.
They were you call it flowers there, and maybe it's meant to have that effect, but it's hops.
Oh, I was referring to the flowers on the corner there, the left on the
actual carriage.
Yeah, I thought you meant the debris flying about. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned the debris though, because I would have forgotten to say that. Yeah, that's what Claire Kilner, the director, said that was. It was they made that drop down create that sort of dreamy effect. And maybe this was meant to be a little bit of a parallel to the little dust motes in front of the light of the window at Dragonstone. So Kat expresses fear that things are going to get worse quickly because the rich are beginning to hoard because people are afraid. And he's like, that's a bad thing to do. And she says, well, we might be doing that too if we had the money. Like if we had more money, we would probably be hoarding as well. And it's a really interesting commentary on power and what people do when they're desperate. And it's like, yeah, people do look to themselves, and they're not necessarily all high-minded and thinking of their communities. Some people do. Absolutely, some people do. But sometimes the wave, the churn, the events from outside are just too much that it puts you in an every person, every family, every man for themselves type scenario. And I think that's what seems to be building or looking towards that. And they're afraid of that coming and what will happen if it does. Their daughter is sick and they're not sure Aegon will keep his promise about paying them well in advance and all that.
There's also a little bit of basic supply and demand. It's not purely hoarding. Like if the person that has chickens used to hatch enough chickens each day to sell 5 chickens to 5 people, but now they don't. Like the chickens and the eggs that were coming in have been limited by the blockade. So now, 5 people came today for chickens, but only had 3. And the next day, 7 people come because they're not finding another place, but only have 2. Like they could sell it for the same price, but eventually they just don't have any more chickens. And the reason they're charging more is because the carrots cost more for the goat stew also. So I need more money for my chickens in order to get my carrots. And like everyone, it's going to get to a tipping point of where we're not charging more. We don't have food. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That might be the riot scenes that are coming. Yeah.
It very much could be. And I agree with what you're saying. There's this cooperation between the two forces of supply and demand and also price gouging. Those two things go together. Whenever there's natural price inflation, people also take advantage. The two things are always found together. And that is probably happening here as well. We shall see. Talking about, going back to Dragonstone and talking about Rhaenyra and Mysaria. This scene begins with Rhaenyra alone looking at books and the lore porn. Good Lord, I want them scrolls. I want access to this library. Gimme. Look at that. That is some cool stuff. You got a book there. She's looking at a book about Visenya. And that's interesting for a couple of reasons. It's already established that Rhaenyra is interested in Visenya as an ancestor. Season 1, episode 1, what did she want her new baby brother or sister to be? Well, she was hoping it would be a sister named Visenya, right? her dad expected a boy named Balon, but she's like, nah, it's going to be a girl named Visenya. And then when she had her own girl who died stillborn and deformed, what did she name it? Visenya. So this is her Targaryen. She's enamored of Visenya. Doesn't bode well if she actually starts behaving like Visenya. Visenya is not like Rhaenyra, not book Rhaenyra, or not show Rhaenyra. She's a little bit more like book Rhaenyra. But Visenya was a hardliner who ruled through fear.
Getting her hair braided a little bit later, just like Visenya gets her hair, wears her hair in a braid. In the scene when Rhaenyra is getting assassinated, she's getting her hair braided by Olinda Massey there.
But she's rejecting. She's like, no, don't. She walks away.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how she just
walks
away
from it too. That was another note that I took. They bothered to show us that and gave us the name of that handmaiden.
Yeah, Olinda. Yeah.
It's Olinda Massey.
Elinda
Massey, because there's a Lord Gorman Massey. She's the daughter of one of Rhaenyra's lords. Is one of her handmaidens.
The Masseys are in A Song of Ice and Fire too. Remember, Justin Massey is one of Stannis' men, the one who tries to marry Asha, and Stannis is like, maybe go get me the sellsword company, and then maybe. A lot of people think Justin Massey's going to be the one who runs into Arya over there in Essos. Anyway, bringing it back over to Dragonstone. So, yeah, Visenya is not a good person for Rhaenyra to emulate, at least not in that sense. She wasn't compromising, Rhaenyra is, at least for now, but maybe that'll change. One person she's very compromising with, she's certainly open to and handles Mysaria in a way that I doubt Visenya would have. Mysaria isn't fully honest with Rhaenyra, but she doesn't tell any big lies. She certainly doesn't tell any lies that would harm Rhaenyra, I don't think. She's mostly just trying to save her own skin and just trying to downplay the things that might get her executed, which is pretty understandable. And she has no one else to protect. This makes her very unique in this entire setting for now, is that she doesn't have a family. She doesn't know. She's lost her position. She lost her house, her home, as she put it, something that she built up very slowly. So she has very little attachments. No people that she's looking out for anymore. She kind of was looking out for the small folk in King's Landing, but now she's like, well, I have no ability to do anything for them. So she's a little aimless, not to be confused with feckless, because she is definitely effective, but doesn't know what to do, and she's worried about being executed here. So she sort of figures out that Rhaenyra is not such a bloody person, not so bad as all that. She's not Otto. She's not Daemon. She starts to realize that actually there's an opportunity here. Rhaenyra mentions a few things about Daemon. She kind of asks a few questions about Daemon, and she uses that to kind of make herself on Rhaenyra's side. She's like, yeah, he does that, doesn't he? Like, I'm on your side. Like, Daemon did that to me too. She's got all these things she can say that's like, oh, I've been there too. He did that to me. I've seen him behave like that. We've got things in common, she's not saying it like that, but that's the message. She's much more, she's too clever to just come out and say it like that, but it's very well done. The dialogue is clever, and the way she just broaches this subject. And then Rhaenyra looks at her in this scene that Ashay has got up on screen right now. This is when she says, you remember me now. Because she's not going to volunteer that. She's not going to volunteer that, hey, I was the one that Daemon used as a pawn to say she was pregnant. And she's like, because now she has to convince her, like, yeah, not everyone found that joke funny. She's honest about, right? She was not happy. She tore Daemon a second butthole after he did that whole, yeah, she's pregnant thing. She's like, it's very similar to what the madam says to Aemon. It's like, you did not consider the consequences to me when you made that lie. You will not suffer for making that lie about me. I might suffer. They might kill me because you make it sound like I'm carrying a prince's child. You won't suffer for that. They won't kill you, but they might kill me. So yeah, when princes lose their temper, the commoners suffer. And she's realized this. She realized that she was playing a game that she shouldn't. She got too far in, got burned, which is the same realization Rhaenyra was having about Daemon. She's like, when I was young, I took your lack of attention as a challenge, like a lot of young women, like trying to get the boy to pay attention to her. Like, obviously boys do that too to girls, but as an adult, she's like, I took that as a challenge, but now I have challenges enough, and she's done with that. And Mysaria is kind of, yeah, they do have a lot in common. She's clever about getting Rhaenyra to see that, but she had to be clever to do it in a way that wasn't offensive, that wasn't like, yeah, we're so close without being a worm. A white worm,
I couldn't decide if she was digging on purpose or if Rhaenyra took it this way at all. But when she was like, I used to want to be of consequence, but now I realize I just can't. Daemon, Otto, they're never going to accept me.
Yeah.
Is Rhaenyra thinking the same thing?
Yeah, I think Rhaenyra is
Yeah.
definitely thinking that. I think the question for me is whether when Mysaria says that, whether she is choosing her words carefully to needle into Rhaenyra.
Yeah,
I think there's no
exactly.
question that it resonates with Rhaenyra and what she's going through right now. But I don't know if Mysaria knew that she was speaking so truly. I think she did.
Yeah, she's saying you need more people like me as your ally or something like that. If not me, you need people who are also in this position, who are outsiders to the patriarchy, so they aren't going to just jump ship for it if it comes around again. Like we talked about with Otto and Alicent. Otto didn't realize he was being misogynist towards his own daughter by undermining her power in front of their sons. And once she pointed it out to him, he's like, to his credit, he's like, yeah, you're right. I won't do that anymore. And this is kind of a similar kind of conversation. She's like, look, these men will not listen to you. Maybe I will.
Follow-up question. When Rhaenyra asked where she got that scar.
It goes unanswered, right? Isn't that interesting?
That was in the wake of her saying, I might as well have stayed a whore.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these men are never going to really respect me. I might as well have just stayed a whore. And then she's like, where'd you get that scar? Was that as a result of being a whore? Or was that, did Daemon do that to her? Is that what we're supposed to get here?
I don't know. I really do not know what that was supposed to tell us. I think those are both valid interpretations, but I'm so unsure that I wouldn't be able to yeah, that's got to be it. I really don't know, but I think it might be partly like it's not, yeah, it's something that happened to her personally, and it's I could be a political ally, but we're not that kind of close. We're not friends. I don't know.
I didn't even piece it together. This is what we're talking about just now, but Rhaenyra did say that, did kind of snap back with that when she was saying, what's the point of trying to be of consequence? These men are never going to matter anyway. And I wonder if that's Rhaenyra trying to separate herself from Mysaria. I'm a Targaryen. I'll get these men to listen to me. Where'd you get that scar? You're just a whore. But in the end, she comes back and says, my bad, I'm going to let you go, right? So.
My guess is that it was a slavery scar, that Mysaria was raised and had a slavery collar or something to that regard. She was a former slave. That would just be my call on what a neck scar like that would mean. Like when you have a slave collar that's too tight consistently, it just I don't know. That's what I think. I've seen other people say it too.
But I'm wondering, not partly, where did this scar come from? But also, why was that Rhaenyra's retort in that moment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wish they had talked about it in the BTS, but they didn't, because that was a scene I was hoping they'd clarify more. But for now, I don't know. We'll have to come back. If y'all have takes on it, let us know. We're very open to it because we don't have much ourselves. Now, another little part of this is perhaps in reference to the scar is we learn, or maybe we learned this a while ago. I just learned it. She's from Yi, not from Lys, which the book version of her is from. So, of course, both Lys and Yi have slavery, so that doesn't actually give us any additional clue, but it does fit the knowledge there. So yeah, she thinks about it a while, off page or off screen, I guess, and then decides to release her. It's nice timing because obviously this leads to the Eric Arik tie-in, which was pretty somewhat vague, but clarified that yes, Mysaria is a big reason why Arik was caught. But again, more on that on Wednesday. She's given a birth on a ship called the Corwin, which is a nice little detail. Corwin was an earlier Velaryon, not a Lord Velaryon. He was the son of Daemon Velaryon, who was Aegon's first master of ships, and he died before Daemon. And there's if I remember correctly, either way, he wasn't the Lord. And there's also, of course, a nod to Corwin of the 9 Princes in Amber series by Roger Zelazny, which George R. Martin is a huge fan of. Corwin's the main character.
I think at least in the show canon, Corwin is Corlys and Vaemon's father.
Oh, really?
I believe, I just, again, for House of the Dragon show canon, I think Corlys and Vaemond, their father was Corwin Velaryon. I do believe. I
think in book canon, we don't know who their father is.
I think that's correct. But I think they clarified that for the show canon.
Yeah. Cool. So that's that for now. It turns out, by the way, that line in episode 1 where Mysaria says to Eric, last time we met, there were two of you. That was foreshadowing, it looks like. Yep, because there was like, wait, there's two of you. That's wrong. There shouldn't be two of you.
I mean, she probably would have known about these twin Kingsguard probably, but I think it's important that she had those interactions with him, because I think Mysaria knows enough that even if she'd never met those two, she might have.
She'll know who the Kingsguard are.
I think she would know that, but it's extra significant to her that she actually has a connection to both of them.
I agree. It was pretty well set up. They weren't just Mysaria and these two people just recognize them. They had scenes together last season, especially during episode 9. And
can I say the little tidbit? I think I teased it before to people that when we get our screener access, they tell you like what not to talk about. And one of the things they said not to talk about was that Mysaria tells Eric about Arik being there, and I was kind of appreciative that they did that, because I could have seen it being a slight argument, a moment of discussion between a lot of folks, but it's just really clear.
Yeah, they make it very clear. That's definitely what happened. Okay, so let's talk about Aemond at the brothel. As we guessed, this is where he was when the blood and cheese scene happened. This is Madame Sylvie, as Ashay clarified earlier. Big Daemon energy in this scene. This is some callbacks to season 1, episode 1, when Daemon and Mysaria have their first scene together. There's this kind of stunted sexuality. Daemon, of course, just can't keep it hard, where Aemon's not really interested in sex in this scene, at least. It's more about being mothered. It's like he's getting the affection that he can't get from his own family, something we've discussed at length in this episode, how they have that kind of dysfunction. But it doesn't end there either. He's confessing things, getting things off his mind, and that's healthy. Like, this is what Alicent can't do. This is what Alicent wanted to do. She wanted to unburden herself and have a confession, and this is what Aemond is doing, and it's probably helping his mental health. He admits that he didn't mean to kill Luke. He says Luke. He doesn't say Prince Lucerys. He doesn't use a formal title. He uses the familiar name, which I think is a good way of having him express some guilt. Like, he does feel bad. He says, I feel bad about it. I lost my temper.
It reminds us how much he grew up with Luke, that these two boys knew each other well enough that he used a nickname for him.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's this great parallel. Just like Daemon believes Viserys feared him, and that's why he put Rhaenyra over him, Aemon now believes Daemon fears him because he thought so much of me. He sent assassins to kill me. Like, if you knew how incompetent those assassins were, you might not be so puffed up on the old ego there. He sees himself as this big military target, which is accurate. He is a big military target. The Rider of Vhagar is a big deal, as Otto reminded him, while simultaneously trying to draw his ego down by also separating him from his brother. But so it's true. Daemon really was as well in the first episode saying, yeah, let's go get Vhagar. He said Vhagar and her rider. He didn't even call Aemond by name. But Aemond is wrong in that this was a military strike. This was out of revenge, out of the caged animal finally being released and allowed to do something, not out of strategy. Certainly not out of fear. That's very far down the list. No one here was doing this because they were afraid of Aemond. So his ego's getting bigger. It was already kind of big, and it's tempered by these childhood anxieties and, quote, the caprice of youth, as was said last episode. Now, we discussed separately how Jaehaerys' death can impact the succession, whether Aemond or Jaehaera is now next in line. But this episode doesn't address that, so we'll come back to that later when that comes up, presumably. And I already mentioned this bit about the High Lord suffering when you played your Game of Thrones, but that's such an important line here in this scene when Sylvie says that it's worth a second mention.
Yeah, it was a strong theme throughout the whole episode that we saw a common through line, I think, of the small folk, or maybe some of the merchant class in some cases, because we see Madame Sylvie, we see the rat catchers and Ulf, and we see Adam and Alan, we see just a lot of different, we see Hugh and Kat, of course, so we see a lot of different walks of life here. And yeah, I'm happy to see this Madame knowing the really powerful role she has right now. She has a prince's ear. And so I'm very pleased to see her try to actually influence him for good and teach him some life lessons. And yeah, I'm very intrigued by this Madam character, whether we see her consistently going forward at all, or again, or I mean, if we see her with Aemond or with other people, I don't know, but solid.
Or if she'll try
Right,
to become
Michael.
a person of consequence like Mysaria, making that mistake. Because that is, obviously, that was a big, this is obviously, the Aemond, Daemon, Sylvie, Mysaria parallels are strong, but that seems to be one that's not here, is that Sylvie isn't trying to like rise high in the underworld and by selling out the prince's secrets. But maybe she
Or
will.
is
Maybe,
she?
or is she? Exactly. Or is she? At this point, it doesn't look like it. And it also seems like she's been here a long time and hasn't been involved in anything like that. So she's probably not going to get started now, whereas Mysaria hit the ground running with that. It was always kind of part of her ambition. Still, it's never too late to sell a secret or two. It doesn't mean she's not going to become some big underworld operator, but that doesn't mean she can't sell it. Like, yeah, she doesn't mean she can't get a little bit involved. We'll see. One other little topic here.
Can I mention
go ahead.
this person here, one of the sex workers that people were really curious about from the trailers? There was this shot of this silver-haired Targaryen girl at the brothel, and people were like, "Who is this? Who is this?" Well, we see it. It's really just a brief shot of her dancing with some other girls, but we do know the character name for this person is Copper Penny, which is a really fun name because she's not a full dragon, just a Copper Penny. Anyways, I just think it's a funny little detail. Whether we see more of her and these other brothel girls, I don't know. These are girls that work at Madame Sylvie's brothel, so like if we see this as a recurring location, we might see Copper Penny or Sylvie again. I don't know.
Sylvie and Copper. Hey. Yeah. So that's also maybe a little bit of a nod to Penny, the dwarf's Penny in A Song of Ice and Fire as
And we
well.
see a dwarf here, a dwarf girl in
That's
this very
true.
episode.
Good call. That might have been intentional to draw that parallel closer. And of course, if you go to like James Bond, there were lots of women named after money. There was Money Penny, and most of the rest were named after sex acts, I guess. But Money Penny was like the administrator, the secretary, something like that. She had an important role, but I don't remember what her official title was. Anyway, so this is our last little part here. I think we haven't talked about Alicent and Otto's final conversation. I do kind of wish the episode ended with Eric Arc. I think that might have been a better way, like a good final note, but they did keep going, and there were a couple other scenes, one of which was this one. Otto and Alicent have their last meeting before apparently he's going to leave. Otto calls the young peacocks, which is a callback to Catelyn using the term Knights of Summer. You know, all their colors and verve and eagerness to die. Fittingly, winter is coming, so you know, Knights of Summer won't will get their comeuppance, I suppose. And it's a parallel to Daemon, an argument and a parting of ways. Daemon goes to Harrenhal, which again we'll discuss that next week after that plot line actually begins, presumably. Otto goes to Old Town and or Highgarden, though I'm a lot less sure we'll be seeing him for. We just might not see him for a while. I'm not sure. He says he'll go to Old Town and bring Alicent's other son to heel. Another son. That's right. There is another child. And we were wondering how they were going to handle this other character. His name is Daron. And it seems like they've made him a little bit younger, which helps explain his absence a little bit. It makes sense. Because if he was like the same age as Aegon and Aemon, they'd be like, where has this guy been all this time? But no, he's young and he's not yet a dragon rider. He has a dragon, but isn't riding it yet. So that's part of why he's not a big deal. But now they're going to make him a deal. A big deal? I don't know, but a deal. And now, not necessarily meaning now as in the next few episodes. I just mean he's been introduced with a line of dialogue. Who knows how much longer before he's actually on screen. But he's in Old Town, which is in the book. His dragon is called Tessarion. We assume it's the same dragon, a blue dragon. And this is kind of making him out to be more like Joffrey. A prince who's there, not prominent, present, but just too young to do much. We've seen Joffrey, tossing one of his brother's possessions in the fire and sitting there looking cute. And yeah, so you would understand that if the Greens had another kid, basically Joffrey's age, what would he possibly be doing of consequence besides just being a little kid? So yeah, that explains why he hasn't had much of a role yet and why he still might not have a role for a little while longer. But at least he's been introduced. At least we know Daron is going to be a part of the show one way or another, even if it's maybe not even till next season. Who knows? But it's definitely coming. And Alicent, in the meantime, says, yeah, I still think we can control Aegon. What do you think, Sean? Do you think she can still control Aegon, or maybe a little bit, or it's a tough one?
Maybe a little bit. She might be able to control him a little bit more through Criston if he's the hand now. But I don't know if she was controlling him through Otto, even though he was the hand. But she might be able to control Criston better than she control Otto. But maybe Criston becoming the hand might be more. He might become more of a loose cannon or corrupt with power himself.
Sure.
I can imagine,
or if he's out in the field at war, he's not politicking if he's out in the field either.
Yeah, he might not be there to be hand,
right?
Which maybe that will open up Alicent, a vacuum for Alicent to be. But yeah, Criston's character is already a little dubious. So when he feels like I'm sleeping with a king and now I'm the hand, no one can tell me what to do.
Can I say what you said?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point.
I think you said he's sleeping with the king.
The queen.
I think you said,
I might have misspoken.
I think you might have.
It's good to be the king.
Well, that would be a scandal. Whoa, hey. So Criston Cole sleeping with Aegon? Whoa, this is a twist. That's not in the book.
There's one little note. If I could go back a second, I wanted to compare and contrast Aemond and Daemon.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like how you were saying, Daemon is trying to absolve himself or avoid any real responsibility for this child being murdered. It was like, it was a mistake. At first he tried to just keep quiet about it. When he got called out, and he knew he couldn't really quite deny it, but he never said like, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have thought it out better, or I realize how bad that is on you now. It was all like, what do you want from me? Kind of mentality. Whereas Aemond is like, I can't believe I did that. I lost my temper. He seems to have real remorse and regret. And, if or how he makes amends for that, I have no idea. But it seems like Daemon, who's avoiding taking responsibility for it, to whatever extent he's going to make amends, probably equates to killing a bunch of innocent people. That's probably what he's about to go do now, right? Like, especially after Rhaenyra calls him pathetic. He's like, I'll show you pathetic.
I'll go kill even more innocent people.
Kill 1,000 people, yeah.
I'll go kill
one kid was bad.
Yeah, I'm going to go kill some more children. You'll see.
I don't exactly expect Aemon to turn into a good guy after this, but it's still, I feel like
you appreciated Aemon that moment.
Being the measure for bad. the goalpost to avoid. Right?
This is a man, like, there's a lot of people in this show who would never say, I'm sorry. And Daemon might be the least likely. But there's a lot who would never. Like, Cole wouldn't say it either.
True.
Alicent wouldn't. Otto wouldn't. Aegon wouldn't. But he might be the least likely. He's the most sure of himself. He's the most confidence, I think. They all have... Confidence definitely rolls up into the arrogance. Like this, it's where does confidence end and arrogance begin? Someone like Daemon has a lot of both. He's got the privilege of his birth and his station and his dragon and his wealth and his titles. If he was
really that competent and confident, he would have gone through those sewers himself. Why could he have not gone along with cheese and blood to attack Aemon? Eric went into freaking Dragonstone by himself.
Right, right. And by the way, I've got a lot of parallels between the passing through Dragonstone and the passing through the Red Keep as part of our Eric Arc episode on Wednesday. We filled up this episode pretty well without talking much about Eric Arc, which is why we do a deep dive of the week. And again, that will be Wednesday at 7, and we'll talk about Eric and Arc. And yeah, we'll have you on for that, Sean, if you're available, because we're not really going to talk spoilers in that one. That's all going to be about just the stuff that happens. I mean, they're both dead. There's not much else going on with them anymore, right? And we can talk about how their legend impacts A Song of Ice and Fire, some real-world parallels, some other influences, and yeah, just talk through the scenes and all the details and the setup and everything. It'll be great. We'll have a good time.
Real quick. Wasn't there a song in the first episode about something about brothers departing, or? Yes,
there was a song called Goodbye Brother in the first episode. It's the Stark theme. Yeah.
They didn't play that here, did they? Because that would have been good also.
It would have been. It's the Stark theme. Everybody recognizes it as Starky, but it would have. But a little tease for the episode on Wednesday. There is a in-world song by Lucian of Tarth called Farewell, My Brother. That is written about Eric and Arc.
Okay.
There you go. So yeah. And then it's possible they even connected that dot when they wrote. No, they couldn't have, because Fire and Blood came out after Game of Thrones, the TV show. So Goodbye Brother came before Farewell My Brother, now that I think about it. All right, well, more on Eric and Ark and Farewell My Brother and all this other sorted stuff on our Wednesday episode. Any final thoughts from y'all? Or are we ready to move to the end? All right, let's do it. Any questions y'all have, send them to us at westeroshistory@gmail.com or join us on our Facebook group or Discord. You can find the links below in the description. And what else? Let me say thanks as well to Bran for our great new intro. It is so cool. We love those coins, the different heads of those coins. They look so real, and it looks like what real Westerosi golden dragons would look like maybe the one Aemond held in front of his eye. Yeah, very good job, Bran. We love it. We'll keep playing that, and we expect to see some changes to it. Lots more to come from us. We've got some scripted videos coming, and of course, we'll continue with our coverage throughout the rest of the season. On behalf of Sean and Ashea, we'll see you all next time, and you know what to do. Valar Rereadus, my friends.